round of hoops, and no sooner do you think you're one step closer, you're actually 2 steps back.
Of course.
But yeah, hopefully, so I've just plowed through 2,000 emails, trying to tell them what is, tell the system what is spam and what isn't.
That's a really strong effort, man. I appreciate that spam filters aren't perfect. I have one email for spam and another for personal use, just because I'm so sick of it. In fact, I have 3 now because of the Liberalists Association.
Oh well, you now have 3 persona.
3 personae, as it were. I'm sure that's incorrect. I've called this.
I would assume personae or personae, whichever way you.
Of course, because it's an E on the end.
Correct one. Yes.
Yes. It's like, have you seen the Mitchell and Webb sketch where they have the grammar police? It's this head of a CEO of a company in a board meeting, and anyone who uses incorrect grammar, he shoots with a handgun. And then, of course, the great irony at the end is he says, he's talking to his co-chair, and the co-chair says, "You can't do this. You've got to stop doing this." And he says, "I just can't stand ignoramai." And the co-chair says, "It's ignoramuses." I'm afraid because of the pejorative, not the plural. Anyway.
So he ends up shooting himself, I assume.
So he shoots himself at the end. Yeah. That's one of those
I think the best grammar-based gag in that regard was in Life of Brian, wasn't it?
Oh, which
the
one was
Roman
that?
centurion takes the Palestinian to task who has written some graffiti like "Romans go home," or hasn't he?
Yes, that's correct. And he makes him write it out 500 times.
Yeah, so eventually the whole forum is covered in it, yes.
Now, don't do it again. That's quite funny, of course. I've named this...
I'll notice from a little yellow oblong in the upper right corner that we seem to have gone live.
Oh, yes, we've been live for about 5 minutes now.
Oh, you swine, you.
Oh, you know it. But I thought just general chit-chat with the British
You have picked up some terribly unhealthy habits from the academic agent in that regard, I see.
But he did do it to me yesterday, goodness. So I should be more appreciative
yes, he has a habit of springing it on you, does he not?
Well, I felt the need to treat our audience to your opinion of web-based intercommunications and grammatical intricacy.
Also, so ever since my revealing that I have been going through 2,000 emails, I have actually already been live.
Pretty much, yes.
Oh well, okay. So,
but
yes.
it is fine. I'm sure you didn't reveal any personal information, especially that thing you told me about your wife before we went live. But I have named...
The rumor mill will now be running wild. You do know that. I mean, given that people are absolutely convinced that I am both Pakistani and Korean, and German, Polish, American, and,
Can you know how some people who basically have their citizenship revoked, or perhaps they have dual citizenship from bizarre and strange places, get often called children of no nation? I feel like you probably are a child of all nations.
Well, yes, but what I mean is, if you then refer to my wife, they will now all be wondering, does she wear a burqa or not?
I have called this stream Fake Accents Unite.
Oh, well, yes, of course.
Of course.
How could we ever forget that, according to someone's, irrefutable judgment, we obviously have got the fakest accents on the internet.
Of course. I can't believe that really your current accent is such a departure from the Geordie that I heard before we went live.
Oh, well, I mean, now you're giving away secrets.
Well, of course, you have to reveal what I sound like in reality, of course, as well.
Well, if I recall correctly, you prove to have an inability to express the article "the." So it must be Yorkshire.
It must be Yorkshire. Ooh.
Wasn't it a Michael McIntyre gag when he was talking about how they can't say "the"?
Oh,
would love to be able to go into a record store and into a and order, what is it, Ta-Ta, the band. And of course, also a copy of the DVD Good, the Bad, and Tugly.
Tugly, of course. Do you know why I've brought you? Have you seen the news today regarding tea?
No, I have not. Is there tea-related news, dear sir?
Now, I am terribly embarrassed because I've said that it's today's news, but clearly someone has shared this to me, and it is in fact from 2015.
Oh, well, so there you go.
So it's clearly a repost.
We're really up to date here, aren't we?
I know, but I don't know. You're still living in the Empire, aren't you?
Well, if you insist.
So there you go. So really, this is jumping forward. This is like Back to the Future for you.
Yeah, precisely. We're 100 years ahead. Well, 200 years. So what is the news, pray?
So if I bring up the article by doing the mythical screen share...
Are you trying to tell me that the Cutty Sark is running late?
If you just read the title...
of the latest tea delivery will be late.
I'm afraid not. It's not quite.
Actually, I think I saw that recently. I may have been aware of the same tweet doing the rounds as you were. Tea is a national disgrace
by inconsiderate citizen.
I believe I suggested to someone, it might be a Scotsman we both know, that this might be something written by someone who had shares in coffee.
Yes, Nescafe. Yes, someone who's like, if I write a damning article of the favourite British tea beverage, then obviously he will have the windfall of a lifetime as everyone suddenly switches to a 0 grade instant coffee. But I love the fact that there are 1,625 comments, which we will get to at some point. Britain's favourite...
Quite a reaction then.
I know, yes. And you can only imagine. But it's like a war between the coffee and the tea drinkers. Not to mention, of course, the individual divisions within tea drinkers of where the milk goes and when.
Oh, of course, yes.
Oh, yes. And whether or not herbal or fruit teas should be considered an entirely different affair, which they should. Britain's favourite beverage is a boring beige relic of our colonial past, because obviously no one, when you drink...
Sorry, may I just interject?
Of course.
Past?
We're living in
yes.
3018 now. If we admit that to ourselves, what else are we going to start doubting? Tea is the slippery slope that leads us down the progressive path to righteousness. That's the entire theme of this.
I find it interesting how the word colonial already appears there.
Of course, particularly given that all progressives are pro-colonialism, I don't see why this is an issue for them.
Well, you see, now here's an interesting one. Now, please don't press me on this because I really have absolutely no idea where I picked this snippet of information up. Nor do I actually know how reliable it is or whatever, but it sort of makes sense in a strange way. And that is that tea has slightly antiseptic qualities.
Oh, don't save this because I have another article.
Okay, yep, go on then.
Involving lung cancer treatment in tea and creativity in tea. So this will be.
So what you are saying is the reason we actually, dominated the world once upon a time is because we were tea drinkers.
Of course.
Tree drinkers.
It makes sense. Yes. Of course. Like tea, you know how cybacillin or whatever it is, the hallucinogenic mushroom. Yep. Some people have theories that it kick-started an evolutionary train in monkeys and so on and so forth and led us to what we are now. Well, I think that tea is what elevated the British above every other nation.
What you're saying is that we need to go back to our roots. We need to give up on all this coffee stuff. And
oh yes, you'll notice that you'll notice that it has absolutely no effect on the Japanese.
Well, it's funny that you should mention Japanese because the Japanese they figure in that example that you told me to hold. So yes, hopefully I will still remember it when we eventually get back to it. Well, you know what I'm like on a stream. I basically don't remember what I said 30 seconds ago.
Of course. 30 seconds, 30 years, it's all the same to you. Let's move swiftly. I love this. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that doing the tea run in the office is one of the worst punishments that can be inflicted upon a human being.
Okay, so yeah, a very very unbiased position
Oh yes,
from which this person is operating.
I'm loving the fact that it doesn't appear to be satirical either. So it's like,
well,
yeah,
it's
you know what?
satirical.
All these appalling Guardian readers are so unbelievably privileged that they can't imagine a worse punishment than being forced to carry 8 mugs of liquid at a time.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that some people might actually do this for a living, never really enters the head.
Well, I did have a rather interesting. I mean, probably not the Guardian nowadays in its rather tabloid-esque appearance now, but I do recall that some places pay 30 cents a word. So some publications. So if you can imagine that this person was probably paid, let's be generous and say half that. And as you can see, the amount of time that's gone into this, you imagine someone's
quite a handsome article, yes.
Oh, in the region of somewhere like, I don't know, £50 to write an article denigrating Great British Beverage.
Well, more than likely the person then went on to decide that the worst culinary crime ever committed on mankind was fish and chips.
Yes, indeed. Or gravy on chips for the Northerners.
Yes, followed by the statement that the worst national anthem of all times was obviously the British anthem.
Yes, indeed. The worst method of travelling the globe was obviously by boat. And definitely not by galleon.
And the most racist sport on earth is obviously football.
Or cricket. Yes. Although I do believe that they would probably make a case for...
That's where they brandish all the St. George's flags, which are pretty much as close to swastikas as you can possibly
get. Although, of course, the cricket and its storied history oppressing the Indies and India makes perfect sense to fit in with their narrative that it's actually a subversive. It's like a submission technique. How do you beat people into submission? You force them to watch the cricket.
Yeah, we give them games that they then take on with more vigor than we do.
Yes,
because I mean, the national sport over here is football. The national sport in India is cricket.
It is indeed.
So, it kind of shows that we kind of did plant a seed there, did we not?
Yes. And it's funny because I do recall, I believe, not that you can take Top Gear seriously back when Top Gear was actually Top Gear, but I do recall them going to India and they could see kids in the street playing cricket and they're remarking upon how appalling it is that it's the worst thing we've ever done to them.
But then again, what we did is we gave them a reason to exist, because that's what we did to all our colonies. Because most of those colonial countries, be it India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, or its correct name, of course, Ceylon, Bangladesh, South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia, they really simply only exist in order to play us at cricket or at rugby.
That would make sense. Ken Lee in chat says, is tea runner a standard position in British corporations? I definitely think that it's a common duty, just generally. Like, it's an expectation. Whoever's the most junior person must fulfill their worth, not by doing actual productive work, but by proving how many mugs of tea that they can bring in one.
I wonder to what extent the tea lady still exists in a lot of public service buildings, so to speak.
It's one of those funny things, because when I was in the RAF, we had tea ladies.
Yeah.
I mean, they did other things as well. They were the staff for the building, but because you had house staff who looked after the messes, if you had a meeting or something, someone would be assigned the tea lady position, and they would come in with a tray.
She would come in with her trolley and
oh yes, with a heated tray on it, no less, and would place that in the centre with a big teapot, and everyone would enjoy.
Yes, for some reason now I can't get out of my head that episode of Dad's Army, where they are being sent on some kind of initiative training course. And one of them, I think it was Walker, has been told by one of his pals that one of the supposed saboteurs that is to surprise them came in, at least with the last group, dressed up as the tea lady. So, of course, this time the real tea lady arrived, and Captain Mannering is a lot, beset.
Yes. Take her on. It's almost as bad as, not tea related, but in Blackadder, if you've ever watched it.
Yes, I'm very much familiar with Blackadder.
When he goes undercover in the hospital to find the German spy, and he accuses the nurse who he has slept with of being the German spy, because the only reason she would ever sleep with him is, of course, to get intelligence out of him.
Yes.
And it turns out that who is it Hugh Laurie plays? It's
I don't remember his name. The only name I can think of right now is Darling, and I can't get it out of my head. But that was definitely not Hugh Laurie's
it's definitely
character.
not Darling. But I love the fact that he's just there writing to his Uncle Schmidt or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's just going, I told him the most terrible joke about General Melchett. Because
I think that Darling gag was effectively a reprise of the Bob gag earlier, wasn't it?
Kind of, but they just said that I watched because I'm sad like that, and I watched the history of the TV program, and they just said that one of them, when they'd come in to write the script, had said one of them had said good morning, and the other one had said, "Oh, good morning, darling," sort of silly in a silly manner.
Yes.
And it made them laugh, and they thought, well, that's going to become a running gag now, isn't it? It's just such a simple concept.
It's perfection, but then you look around. I mean, that what's she called? That comedienne who recently just made that gag with Jeremy Corbyn standing at the airport waiting.
Oh, I'm not familiar with this one.
Oh, well, there is a gag doing the rounds on social media that is taken from a BBC comedy show, where she is dolled up, with lots of fancy makeup to look like Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah,
or at least I think it's her. And she is basically waiting for a taxi.
Yes.
And of course, immediately Jeremy Corbyn starts doing the sort of glad-handing politician bit, whereby he tries to ingratiate himself with all the people who are in the line waiting for taxis.
Yes.
And of course, the embarrassments just don't stop happening. Like Jerry Adams turns up.
That's amazing.
And then, immediately sort of gives him a hug and reminds him of the good old days. And looks at the others and goes, "Oh well, people always sort of say he was one of the peacemakers or something like that, but you should really know what he's like." So then he kind of tries to kind of brush that off, and Jerry Adams goes on his way, and then of course the taxi pulls up, and he agrees to share with 2 or 3 others, and they get in. And it's some Asian-looking fella driving a car that sort of looks across his shoulder and goes, "Oh, hi, Jeremy. Don't you remember? We met at the Hamas meeting." Or just...
I will never get the soundbite out of my head of Jeremy Corbyn saying, "Our friends in Hamas," or Hezbollah as well. That was the thing when he invited them to Parliament. Just honestly, I don't understand how he manages to convince himself that what he's doing is the right thing. I genuinely don't.
It's a very, very strange one in that regard. But as the reason I sort of touched upon that was because that is one sketch that now seems to have been, people find funny because it kind of hits a sort of basic truth.
Yes.
But these days, that is where we are with British comedy. We once every blue moon get one scene that people decide is funny.
What was the name of the show with the puppets in the Thatcherite days?
Spitting Image.
Spitting Image, yes, where they have Hitler living in 10 Downing Street, and asking Thatcher's asking Hitler for advice, and
you just look at the cast that was behind Spitting Image and whatever. Do you know that Ian Hislop was one of the people involved with Spitting Image?
It doesn't surprise me in the slightest. They tried to do a remake of it recently, actually.
Oh, I mean, they've been trying to make a remake of a great many things.
But they redid it in the run-up to with Nigel Farage and all sorts in the run-up to either the Brexit vote or one of the general elections.
I mean, what's the chap called? The one that played Rimmer in Red Dwarf.
Oh,
he was actually a very good impressionist.
Oh, is he?
Yes. So
I adore
in Spitting Image. And I believe Rory Bremner might also have been involved. So basically,
Chris Barry, you're thinking of?
Chris Barry, yes.
Yes.
So quite a few people who later went on to make a name of their own were involved in Spitting Image. It was quite a sort of a hive for talent.
Mm.
And yes, I mean there are some very famous sketches among what is it? What about the vegetables? Oh, they're having the same as I am.
And then, speaking of,
if you recall, that famous line that was attributed to Thatcher in that sketch later appeared in the biographies of several ministers who misremembered and truly believed that she had said that.
Amazing.
At the dinner.
This is almost as bad.
Spitting Image.
It just you just imagine the cultural influence some of these programs had, because of course they had such a large hegemony. Yes. Due to the the lack of satellite television,
they could make or break a politician.
Because I remember when the Labour government came in the 90s, and Yes Minister had such a profound effect on both the politicians, the public, and the civil servants, that the new Labour government had a huge problem for about 6 months where they did not trust the civil service at all, and they hardly did anything because they thought they were going to stab them in the back as soon as look at them.
Well, the funny thing about Yes Minister is that they hit the nail on the head so precisely that it was obvious that it was an inside job. So the government launched an investigation trying to establish who are the insiders who are giving away how we run things.
Amazing. I do recall that
they actually, today one knows who the people were, but at the time, the BBC mystery. Never revealed it. And yes, they never managed to find out who exactly it was, because it was so precise. That is actually how those departments are run. Now, with the best will in the world, if you're writing something and you imagine a minister and whatever, you will not get the protocols correct, if you know what I mean. You need someone who is on the inside to tell you that.
My favorite...
Sorry, go ahead.
My favorite episode with that one, and just highlighting the bureaucracy, is the episode surrounding the hospital with 300 administrators.
The Compassionate Society, that's what the episode is called.
And no doctors or staff or patients, because they would get in the way of the administrators. And how he swears that he's going to close this hospital to cut costs, and at the end of the episode he's claiming that he has saved 300 jobs because he's no longer going to close the hospital.
Well, what is so perfect about that is you wonder whether it's true, because you see, when you hear that there was an investigation, and there truly was, they did launch an investigation. They wanted to know who was giving away the secrets. What we're never told is, was it really that they realized that there was someone on the inside that was telling this, writing team all the secrets?
How things were being done.
Were they just telling them how things were being done? Or were they actually telling them some of the examples
State
of what
secrets
had happened? So the cover for the investigation by the government was, it's national security. We need to know.
Oh, of course.
But in reality, you wonder, that hospital story sounds so plausible.
Oh, it does.
Because
it was such a delicious...
Just to explain to the audience, the situation is supposed to be that the hospital was being built, and it was coming to completion just as the new budget was announced, in which overall cuts were being delivered. So the health ministry, the Department for Health, basically says, look, we can't open new wards if we're actually closing wards in other hospitals.
Yes.
The only way we would be able to open new wards in this hospital is if we actually cut yet more jobs from other hospitals. So effectively, they've got a surplus hospital.
And they didn't know what to do with it. They've invested too much money into it to let it go.
Yes.
And at the same time, they can't do anything with it.
So in the end, they make it a refugee centre, don't they?
That was right, yes. And Sir Humphrey is very unhappy with this.
You just feel there's a certain ring of truth about it. Maybe not a hospital, but you could see some sort of facility being built. And then the cuts come in, and suddenly that facility is basically surplus to requirements.
Indeed.
And then you start looking around as to what on earth do we do with this? And the very fact that, who is it? What's he called? Bernard.
Yes, the trainee civil servant.
The Bernard basically tells him, oh, we've conspired to leave the skips there and the cranes and all the barriers in order to make it look as if the hospital isn't finished yet, Minister. You know, the usual sort of thing. At which point, of course, the minister almost, he almost flips his lid when he says, what do you mean the usual sort of thing?
I do love the fact that they counterbalance the senior civil servant of Sir Humphrey with Bernard being idealistic and sort of wanting to see change and to mess things around and stir the pot.
Well, yes, Bernard was supposed to be his, what is it, his private secretary, or what do they call him?
Yes, he is his secretary, the principal secretary.
That could be it.
Yes,
because they have got all of them at one point secretary of some sort, aren't they? Even though that doesn't mean they can type. Yes,
I believe there's a gag at one point where he says that you need a secretary for the principal secretary to the private secretary, because Sir Humphrey is the private secretary and Bernard is the principal secretary to the private secretary.
Yes, and I think it's very early on that kind of the minister looks at them in the first day and goes, "Can they all type?"
Yes.
Sir Humphrey just looks at him and goes, no. Mrs. Jenkins can type.
Yes, Mrs. Jenkins
is the secretary. Yeah,
it's funny. Just moving us back to this tea article. Yes. Indeed. It says, go into any house in England and you will be offered tea. Well, I should certainly hope so. It's just polite discourse. Barge in. Just walk into a nana's house, any nana in this case. Oh, sorry, the nana will say. Can I get you a cup of tea? The nana will walk slowly to the kitchen, boil a fresh kettle of water and warm a teapot. She has a complex hierarchy of doilies. I'm gathering that this seems a bit like projection. 6 different biscuits on the same ornate plate. Sorry about the biscuit selection, the nana will say, only I wasn't really expecting visitors. It's a crime that you don't go and see your nana more. But that's a conversation for a different day. So this sounds to me like he has terrible anxiety, both about seeing his nana and her collection of doilies, and the fact that he doesn't see his nana enough, and he feels bad about it.
Yes, one can't help but feel that he is kind of unwittingly revealing some of his private pain to us here.
This sort of neuroses. Yes, I believe it's a he. It's Joel Golby.
Oh yes, yeah.
Yes, it's a crime that you don't go to see your nana more. Blah blah blah. Tea is the thing now. Turn to the nana. I just have this image of walking into, a grandparent's house and calling them the grandparent. Right? So you can never refer to them by any term of affection. They're always the.
Yep.
She has countdown on in the background, but she has it on mute. Turn to her, nana, old lady, whatever your name is. Tea is shit.
Okay. Yes. It's a type of approach, I guess.
I mean, it's almost as if taste is subjective.
Yes, but it's also a kind of strange. One cannot help that quite a lot of his unwitting revelation about the processes involved of negotiating with his nana has been cut in the final edit from that particular paragraph. Because there is a certain leap there, isn't there? How exactly did we get from the doilies and then immediately to tea being shit?
Well, it's like one of these things. You could change tea, I suppose, for pretty much anything. It's like Brussels sprouts or a particular brand of mushroom. You just go, well, you have this thing that you don't like, but that most people do like.
Yes.
And therefore, because you feel you have the moral high ground, I'm afraid your taste needs to be disseminated amongst the public, and all you need to do is wake them up. I mean, I don't know what he expects this hypothetical Nana, to do. Sort of turn to him and go, "Oh my God, well, you're right."
You see, I've got the feeling that there is something going on here which plays into his innate sense of superiority. That he is effectively sort of convening with his brethren here in the Guardian readers, so to speak.
Yes.
As in, there's a nudge and a wink involved here. As in, we know.
Yes, we all.
Whereas, of course, the hoi polloi, the tea drinkers among the population,
the savages, if you will.
Precisely, yes. They are not quite as clued up as we are. They don't possess the necessary sophistication to know that tea is shit.
It's quite funny, given that we see it the other way around for them. Tea. I'm not even going to say that sentence. It sounds like blasphemy to me. We don't examine this enough in England. We putter along thinking that tea is good, but it's not. It's a lukewarm mug of leaf water presented as a cure-all for life's ills. I mean, again, you have to consider what the other options for beverages are on the market. Either this person is sitting there drinking his cup of perfectly tepid, lukewarm, room temperature water, thinking this is the greatest drink on earth. Or they have either coffee, which is, let's face it, like earth in water. Or they're having, a Coca-Cola or something, or even a protein shake, which is powder in water. You just think, well, I mean, just your description there is not exactly ingratiating. It's like, well, if you have, I don't know, water with fruit in it, it's just, dirty tree fruit.
You're speaking to someone who grew up on the continent. And not only did I grow up on the continent, but I grew up on the continent some decades ago. And trust me, the supply of tea was atrocious.
Yes, my aunt.
Eventually having come back to Britain, I am very appreciative of the sheer quality of tea that people drink here.
I mean, I went out and stayed with my aunt to look after her children whilst they went on holiday in Belgium, and basically what happens is whenever she visits us in the UK, she stocks up on an inordinate amount of varied tea, chocolate, and otherwise products because they simply have no access to it. It's a funny one, particularly on the continent. They seem to have an adoration for chocolate containing hazelnut, which I cannot fathom for the life of me.
Chocolate containing hazelnut.
Yes, like Nutella chocolate.
Okay, yes.
All of that has that, but that supersedes anything else. And if you want chocolate with anything, on chocolate on biscuits or in cakes or whatever, it's always a mission to find it without hazelnut. And likewise, you either find one or the other variety of tea, plain or plain but with a different color.
Well, usually the tea, which at least some years ago, I must say, seemed to be the market leader on the continent, seemed to be Liptons.
Oh yes. The iced tea makers, as I know.
Yes, but the kind of the image that I had of the Lipton's tea selection process was if you think of some kind of warehouse in India or Sri Lanka,
yes,
where the equivalent, the tea equivalent of the Del Monte man arrives to basically see what he wishes to purchase. The mental image I always had was this chap comes in and there are these heaps of tea leaves in front of him, not yet ground up, so proper tea leaves.
Yes.
And he kind of, chews on one or two of them and he decides on this or that. And that's perhaps, the top quality tea that goes off to the Twinings and the the tailors of Harrogate's and whatever of this world. And then slowly the heap gets smaller and smaller until eventually just about,
I could see where you're going with this.
Has eventually helped itself, and sooner or later there is pretty much no more tea left, except for the sweepings on the floor. Which pretty much need to be brushed up with a broom, and they consist of more dust than they actually do of tea leaves. And that seemed to be what went into the Lipton's tea bags that were available for my delectation in the days gone by.
You poor man, I do feel for you. A terrible slight to your character. Let me see. Nice cup of tea, people say, when you've watched a vivid car accident. Well, notice it's not been in a vivid car accident. Like, it's not as if you've actually suffered, but you might have been triggered by the car accident viewing. Or given a terminal diagnosis. Okay. Or gone for a walk and it started raining. Whether the mafia has kidnapped you and made you kill a man with a gun to win your freedom, or if you've done quite badly in an exam, someone will say, let me get you a nice cup of tea. And I think, yes. I mean, other than the fact that caffeine is a stimulant and therefore will make you feel a bit brighter anyway, it's a point of sort of cultural solidarity with people that you sit down to talk over a cup of tea, and it's something to occupy your hands with. Whilst you do.
To put it, briefly, it is perfectly civil.
Indeed.
And it is something to which there is no class distinction, much as this author seems to try to make it so. There isn't really.
No, it transcends.
You could have Tommy Robinson come round, and you could offer him a cup of tea.
And you would know instantly as well.
Or you could have the judge who sentenced him come round and offer him a cup of tea, if you know what I mean.
And you know instantly that one would require an awful lot of milk and sugar, and the other one would require a builder's brew. and this is intrinsic, and you know what kind of person you're dealing with.
And more so, you could have the Queen round and offer a cup of tea, and it would be perfectly acceptable.
Indeed, it's one of those.
In that regard, it is one of those social glues.
Yes, it transcends class and culture, class and sort of situational barriers. It's a funny thing to consider as a point of cohesion for the British people. But
once upon a time, a similar thing, of course, now this is completely off the menu, but once upon a time, a similar thing would have also been the case with a cigarette.
Indeed.
That you would have offered someone who had just had an accident or had something stressful to them or whatever, you would offer them a cigarette. You would offer them a cup of tea and a cigarette.
One of the funny things I find with it is tea in particular. I mean, everyone did used to smoke cigarettes, so it was much more culturally instantiated. But tea in particular, aside from anything else, its flavour is basically uncriticisable. I don't know anyone who could say that a cup of tea is outright disgusting. They might not prefer it, and they might think it's a little bland.
I could remind you of my Liptons story.
Oh, of course. There are different varieties, right? But a good cup of tea made by a decent person, will taste of tea, and it's an unoffensive taste. And so you can offer a cup of tea to someone as much as it's a step up from water. But it's, and some people really like them, and really high quality tea is gorgeous, obviously. And anyone who's in the hoi polloi, the top brass, who wants to have their fancy, different types of tea, can also do so. But like a standard cup of typical tea is, just Yorkshire tea, cheap as anything, or even Tetley, even though I wouldn't personally purchase that type. It's one of those things that you can be relatively certain that no one's going to turn their nose up and absolutely hate. You can offer a cup of tea without fear that it's going to be rejected because
you won't have the plumber round, and then when you offer him a cup of tea, he won't kind of take a sip of it and look at it and go, "Good God, what's this?"
The Apollo TD said the only way Tories avoid 1997 defeat repeating itself is by massively increasing the NHS budget and a perfect Brexit free trade deal outside the single market. I have no idea why they think this is related to our current conversation.
I don't know. It more than likely the suggestion is underlying all this that the first thing David Davis should do when he sits down with Michel Barnier next time round is to say, well, right, before we start negotiating, can I offer you a cup of tea?
Oh, of course. I do believe that the continent is in the state it is due to a chronic lack of tea.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, what other reason could there possibly be?
I mean, they're so angry all of the time, and it just makes sense that the tea would mellow them out. Let me see.
That was the underlying problem with Adolf Hitler, was it?
Yes. Fascism would never have come about if he just sat down with a good cuppa and his Sunday best. Yes. I mean, what an assertion. We are breaking boundaries here today on stream. We're solving life's issues, and it's all due to the fact that we've sat here on stream with a cup of tea each discussing the topic.
Well, you know, I think we've basically established that it isn't a problem in the world you can't solve with a cup of tea.
Or at least that you can't start with solving.
Therefore, my chief piece of advice to any US diplomats listening, when in the near future Mr. Trump and Kim Jong-un get to meet, should that actually, finally come about after the will not, whatever situation, make sure that the first thing they do is they sit down and share a cup of tea.
Now I cannot get out of my head the scene from Ali G in the house when Ali sits down at the G20 and everyone is very angry and he spikes the tea with marijuana.
As you would, yes.
And it becomes hash tea and everybody gets incredibly high and they solve a number of
world peace is brought about by some marijuana in the tea. Yes.
If Adolf would have had a good cup of PG Tips, we might have lost the war. So let's not be too. Yes, that's the only.
But would there have been no war?
Oh, no! If you got it early enough, but thank God no one introduced it to him mid-campaign.
There was a wonderful episode I once saw where they were talking about the sort of reconnaissance services of the RAF during the war.
Oh yes, I know a great deal.
They had one of the problems you have with any kind of shot from above is to establish, how high was the plane. So what is the actual scale of this image? What are you actually looking at? What's the scale of it? And one of the easy ways in which they could determine, this is the RAF chaps, could determine the scale of a photograph taken was a cricket pitch.
Amazing.
You would know what the length of the green would be. Yes. But they then, it was then pointed out to them that, well, yes, there is a problem with that. The Germans don't play cricket.
One of the funniest things that I noticed about reconnaissance was when they were using it to map the UK to a degree with Ordnance Survey and that sort of thing, because they did that. There were a number of sites that the government wanted blacklisted, and all of the photos from the mapping were going to be publicly available, and they didn't really like the idea that anyone could have a plan view of a number of these facilities. And so on a number of these immensely clear images, on the occasional one, there is a cloud that for some bizarre reason that the cameraman did not think to wait till it had passed, that obscures a part of the landscape. And the funny thing about this cloud is it appears to have teleported across the UK.
Same cloud every time.
A dozen or more times. And it's the same cloud in every photo, yes. In the same way that the British radar stations, there's one at Wartling, I believe, and another one which I can't remember where it is. But they'd built these bunkers, these sort of 3-story bunkers underground, and to cover them up under farmland, and to cover them up, they had to build something on top. So they built a bungalow that a farmer would live in. And then the staff would come, and there's a door in the basement that leads down into the bunker, and that was where the war rooms and the radio operators and all the radar was done. But these were built in about 7 or 8 locations around the world, because they obviously wanted to place them in places like Malta.
Let me guess, they were all done exactly to the same plan.
They were all done to the exact same specification, the exact same decor, and the exact same design. And crucially, they were all out of place with any of the local architecture in all of the locations in which they were placed.
Beautiful. Yes, you can't really plan that more precisely, can you? Did you know, I mean, you've got an RAF background, haven't you?
I do, yes.
Because in the Second World War, they had some pink Spitfires, didn't they?
Now, this is something I have not heard of.
Yeah, apparently they worked out that I think it was at dawn and at dusk.
Oh, yes, it would have been
the best colour with which to actually camouflage the plane is to have it completely pink. So
now,
we're talking that they pink did all around. You know, it literally is just a pink plane.
I knew that
it was actually a plane of war.
Yes, I knew that they did something similar in when they went to fight in desert environments, because they were very hard to spot both from above and below if they put this color scheme on. But no, I didn't know they did it in as far back as then. Nuno de Silva says, the British don't drink tea, only beer in my experience. Have you ever been inside a British home? I mean, beer is for the pubs. And
yes, in pubs, obviously, beer gets consumed in considerable quantities.
But think public British is beer, and private British is tea, to basically either cure the hangover or to be enjoyed because you don't have one. Right.
Well put.
Oops. Data protection. Let me see. We argue about how to make the best tea. Milk first, some people say wrongly. So this person has this idea about how to make tea, even if they don't enjoy it. I put it to them that they've been making it wrong, and therefore that's why they don't enjoy it.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to continue reading if you have comment. Please.
Well, the thing with the milk first, I mean, that goes back to the, sort of inferior quality cups that might have otherwise split if you actually poured red hot tea right into them.
I see, for me, it's always been, I would never serve a guest milk first, but I serve myself milk first because I know how much milk I like.
Yes. That's the sort of underlying problem. That's why I don't put milk first in, because to me it's always, I want to see how brown it gets effectively. So like that, I've got a good gauge of, yes, how beige it eventually becomes. So not too beige, but then at the same time you don't also want sort of almost no milk in at all. And I'm not good at gauging that if I put that in advance. But yes, the old habit is actually milk in first, but this was because like that, you put the cooling liquid in first in order to protect the cup. But that goes way back in time.
Interesting piece of trivia there. Oh, Sarah, daughter of Albion, has joined us. Who says, Wedgwood or Spode?
Well, now, dare I point out that there is no E after the G in Wedgwood. And I would say Wedgwood, not Spode, if that's the question.
Yes. Let me see.
They made him a member of the Royal Society, Josiah Wedgwood, for his methodology which he worked out in gauging temperatures in the kiln.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he became pretty much a proper scientist rather than just a potter.
From humble beginnings. It's almost like the story of a young carpenter's son, I remember.
So Josiah Wedgwood is the Jesus Christ of Britain. Well, there you go.
Nuno de Silva says, so milk is acceptable, but not honey in tea. It depends. I mean, most people that I know choose not to have sugar or any kind of sweetener in their tea anyway. But I just don't think it's common practice here to have honey in tea because we have it typically with milk.
Yes, I have sugar in my tea. I prefer brown sugar in my tea. But so Demerara sugar, but honey has too much of a strong taste of its own. It just wouldn't be. It would be out of place in a cup of tea.
It is I think, when mixed with the fatty taste of the milk. But it's quite nice, a little teaspoon of honey in either in a dry tea, so no milk at all. But it's not something that I would have commonly. I would normally drink that if I was ill. In Portugal, honey is okay. Milk is almost taboo. I suppose it's just a cultural thing because we have a huge.
I'm also guessing that Portugal is not much of a dairy country.
No, whereas England and Britain definitely very much is, and honey does have some amazing properties for the immune system and healing, and it's processed in a way which is completely different to other glucose chains. So they are still discovering many of the wonderful things about honey. It's incredibly nutritious. Yes, I think the British have almost an obsession, particularly with dairy products. We have more varieties of cheese than anywhere else in the world.
Well, the French might give us a run for our money.
No, they don't. They really don't. They may have developed a number of them, but they don't consume them actually themselves per capita, apart from in the tourism industry. So we actually have more on offer because the French will eat French cheeses, but we will eat all cheeses, if that makes sense.
I see. So we're not really talking of the kind of the homemade cheese. How many different types of cheese the British make?
Oh yes, and have available and will purchase.
Yeah. So basically, how much is available in shops on average? So you would say there would be more available in more variety available in British shops. But I would still say more than likely, as a nation, France produces more different types of cheese than Britain does.
And we buy them all and take them over here. Daughter of Albion says, has Britisher been to World of Wedgwood in Staffordshire?
No, I have not been to World of Wedgwood. It's a very oddly situated museum, is it not? Because I think I'm assuming this is the kind of the Wedgwood Museum in Stoke, is it not, that we're talking about?
I'm not familiar with it, so I can't say.
I would guess that there more than likely is not a Wedgwood themed theme park.
Everything made of wedged wood.
But you would have thought that you would have a phenomenal museum like that, but you would situate it in London, where most people would be able to see something like that. Now, you understand why it is in Stoke, because, well, that's where it actually happened. That's where all these goods were manufactured. But it's that far off the beaten track, to my mind, that is just an unwise. It's an underutilized resource simply due to its location.
The Apollo TD says, do the French have Wallace and Gromit? No, our cheese is superior. Which is very true, and we have Aardman to thank.
Wasn't there a comment by Charles de Gaulle once that referred to cheese, that basically about the governability of France? And he kind of responded to some journalist that asked him about that, in sort of a slightly exasperated fashion, the Gallic shrug, going, well, how do you expect to run a country that produces more than 300 different types of cheese?
Amazing. And interestingly, cheese, when it gets digested, actually releases more endorphins than chocolate.
Which is why that's an interesting fact.
Which is why eating cheese makes you feel good. Interestingly.
But that kind of questions why the ladies are also attracted to chocolate rather than to cheese.
It does also, chocolate does different things to ladies than it does to men. Let's just leave it at that. Releases other chemicals aside from the dopamine.
Moving on.
Let's see. The people are willing to raise fists over this, the milk in first or not. They are ready to duel to the death over how long a bag should be left in a mug, or whether a bag should even see the mug in the first place. Whether a bag should be locked in the prison of a teapot and squeezed of its blood through a spout. No sugar, people shout, as you waddle off to make another interminable cup of tea for them, and another will chime in, 100 sugars. I don't know about you, but 100 sugars just won't.
Here, isn't he?
100 sugars just simply won't dissolve. It's not viable. Getting to 3 is pushing it. You're talking to someone who's clearly giving themselves, voluntary diabetes at that point.
It's sort of tea-flavored syrup by that time.
Sarah has corrected you. There are 246 types of cheese in France.
Oh, well, there you go. But I would still assume that that beats what Britain churns out in terms of types of cheese.
Nuno da Silva says Portugal and the UK versus France and Spain would be a good thing to see.
In what regard?
Yes, in what regard? Are you talking about tea wars, or are you literally just a bloodthirsty monster who wants to see us go to war?
Who wants to see a thermonuclear war between France and Britain? Yes.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition to come across the new site of Chernobyl, which is the English Channel.
But of course, it's interesting that Portugal is paired with the UK there, because Portugal is our oldest ally.
He says both, or they say both. They want to see both a tea war and a real war. I mean, I know which one I'd prefer.
I think it goes back to something like a 14th century royal wedding or something like that, that ever since then, the Portuguese have been a very close ally of the Brits, or of the English then, and then it kind of transferred to Britain from there.
Oh, it wouldn't surprise me.
But hence, I mean, that's why, for example, the British went down to save Portugal from the advance of Napoleon's troops through Spain, because Portugal was the old ally.
How interesting. My continental European history is somewhat lacking, unfortunately. It's one of those things, one of those areas I really need to brush up on. Academics, every time I say the word academic, I mean, he's chosen a good name there for advertising, because it can't help. And I feel like whenever my viewers hear me say the word, then they know who I'm talking about. And I'm advertising his channel for free. Of course, that was the greatest trick academic agent ever pulled, was making everyone call his name. Academics have recently uncovered the oldest tea in Britain. Oh, interesting. Proving once and for all that we have been tea bores for more than 300 years. So something that is storied and has tradition and has survived cultural imbalances for 300 years, which is a strong social glue that holds the fabric of British society together.
But it's shit.
We're bores. Yeah. We're bores, and it's clearly terrible that it does that.
Yeah, I think the next article that person will more than likely write will be, because obviously this is a Guardian reader, so he will no doubt be bilingual and be able to write an article in fluent French.
Oh, I don't think it would be French. Or it could be French postmodernist. It's probably Cuban.
Publish in some, Le Monde or whatever, an article as to why French wine is shit.
Yes.
These kind of social glues that almost define nations. Because this is what he's taking a pot shot at here, really, is it not?
Nuno da Silva says, from what I know, it was the Portuguese who introduced tea to the UK. It's an old myth from here. Although I'm not really sure.
Could be, because there was an old Portuguese colony in India.
Ooh, yes.
It was sort of on the west coast, sort of halfway up, and desperately struggling to remember its name. But it could therefore be, because Vasco da Gama, he was the one who found the way around the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. So they opened up the trade toward India. And they had a colony on the coast of India, and of course they also had, is it Macau in China, which was a little bit further down from Hong Kong. So yes, they could well have been the people who brought tea via ship to Britain.
Goa,
yeah, there you go, Goa. That was it.
The Apollo TT says, one feels that tea might not be the most important factor in producing intelligence, as I presume Thomas Sowell and Pinochet didn't drink tea. I will point out that we're being mildly facetious when we attribute tea to be the root cause of the evolutionary progress of the British Isles. However, it's just one of those things. Can you imagine what Thomas Sowell and Pinochet would have become had they drank tea?
Yes, I mean,
yes,
sky's the limit. I mean, I only hope that Einstein drank tea, because if he wasn't drinking tea and he was nonetheless already that intelligent, then it is quite scary as to what he might have otherwise become.
I believe that someone of Einstein's caliber would probably have transcended the real world, and then we would never have discovered anything. So perhaps it's a blessing.
There would have just been some kind of strange ethereal noise, and he would have just his matter would have just dissolved, and he would have become some kind of divine creature floating through the cosmos.
If you do not think we are collectively boring about tea, offer to do an office tea run right now. Someone will hold up a single finger whilst they rootle about in a desk drawer for a bag of green tea. Someone else will pass you a tiny carton of sweeteners or some agave. Or agave? I think it's agave. You'll have to carry all of this to the kitchen when there is someone you vaguely remember from the Christmas party waiting to make small talk with you. You have to go down to reception and ask if they've seen the tray. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that doing the tea run is one of the worst punishments that can be inflicted on a human being. So what I'm hearing is not that tea is shit, but that you have shit co-workers who aren't happy with a normal cup of tea.
Yes, and then kind of pile on the guilt if the tea is not made to their absolute sense of perfection.
Not to mention the fact that this person clearly doesn't know the members of their office, because he's saying someone you vaguely remember from the Christmas party. So they're clearly not very cohesive in the work environment. And I can only attribute this to a lack of tea and common tea in the office.
I think there is good reason behind your thinking there, to be honest. Yes.
Indeed. Let me see. Nuno de Silva says, I guess my next video, your next video, will be top 10 teas that you should buy. I mean, I would do one if you would watch it, Nuno. That would be funny. Ben says, Mark doesn't drink tea. He thinks coffee is tea, which is a lie. And he says that I drink Relentless and smokes Mayfairs. Also a lie. So, there you go.
A relentless tea drinker. Well, that's an interesting concept.
Well, Relentless, I believe, is one of these sort of like high caffeine taurine energy drinks.
Oh, so that was okay. Sorry, that was a reference to a brand rather than the relentlessness of your consumption of tea.
Yes. And Sarah tells me that I vape, which is also something I don't do. Strong. Let me see. How did we get like this? Inflicting the worst punishment in human history. Never mind death by 1,000 cuts. It's death by 1,000 tea trays now. It's not the rack. It's the tray.
Yes, or is it Ling Chi? Is that I think that's the death by 1,000 cuts.
Mm.
And I was actually I was surprised to find out that the last official death by 1,000 cuts executions in China was still in the 20th century.
Oh, really? Amazing.
Yes, it kind of fills you with a certain sense of foreboding regarding that particular people.
Chinese water torture or filling the kettle for the 10th time? I mean, it's your choice, but I know which one I'm going with. And I don't think one of them is quite like the others, It's like having your toenails pulled off.
Talking of which, wasn't there some... I don't think... It wasn't an Agatha Christie plot, I'm quite sure, but there was some crime story where this goes back quite a while, where the eventual reason why the family members did in the rich American uncle was not in order to inherit his money. It was primarily due to the sheer disdain they felt for him, for brewing tea with tea bags rather than loose tea.
Amazing.
Again, don't ask me where I know this. It's just something I somewhere remember vaguely having picked up once.
I hope that when you eventually pass from this world in a few millennia, that you will donate your brain, filled as it is with the world's best encyclopedia of
most useless trivia,
quiz trivia, that it will be there, and we will have reached a point in technology where we can just download the contents of your brain.
I feel I already pity whatever person it is that has to read through it.
They'll have got, they'll be wearing red and a pith by the end of the day. It'll become a challenge, one of these sort of special forces mental gymnastics challenges that you have to overcome in order to join the Secret Service.
They'll all immediately start sounding like Michael Caine shouting, "Stop throwing them bloody spears at me," which of course is something he never actually said in the movie, but nonetheless the stereotype stuck. Yes.
Will this show run over the BBC Question Time that I've paid for with my TV license?
Well, will it? I don't know.
I mean, we can.
To license for that TV license. Yes, I like that.
License, yeah. Dear. Liking tea has its roots in colonialism.
Of course it does, yes.
I love the fact that it's not tea. Because
with every sip, you're kind of further oppressing the once oppressed people of the empire.
Don't you know that for every sip that you take, that's a sip that can't be given to a starving child?
So every sip is yet another lash of the whip.
Indeed, it's you can imagine as you pour the kettle and it boils, you can hear the screams of the oppressed.
It's not actually of any benefit to the people who basically have therefore made a living planting tea and selling it to us. It's still a continuation of colonial oppression.
Well, you know how some of the more savage tribes and that sort of thing in history used to drink the blood of their enemies to gain their strength.
Yes, preferably.
We've discovered a far more civilized. We've discovered a far more civilized way of distilling pure, unadulterated soul into
you say far more civilized, but of course, in the eyes of this particular author, we are little more than the kind of predator tearing the spines out of our victims.
Indeed. Making a big thing of enjoying tea now is somehow worse than liking it. Of course, because it's morphed over the ages from that fragrant haybox academics earthed this week, god damn it, which we used to brew and drink like normal people, into something else. It is now at once the twee height of Englishness, but also, I mean, it's Englishness, but because they've forgotten to put a space in, because what is editing? But also the most basic solution to any problem, a cuddle in a mug or a coddle in a mug. And I'm like, why do you not want to be coddled in that regard when it comes to you've just had some incredibly distressing news or even something just mildly unpleasant? And it's quite nice to sit down and be coddled for 5 minutes and then return to reality.
Yes, and how do you have afternoon tea without tea? I mean, then just the sandwiches and the scones, but you're not having a tea with it. Unless you drink some other terrible continental concoction.
I tell you, I was expecting this stream to bomb terribly and have absolutely no viewership, and we've somehow managed to get 8 people hanging on.
Well, there you go. They're hanging on for dear life, no doubt, wondering when Question Time is beginning on the BBC.
Yes,
Sorry.
One of the chats says Heathrow's third runway means that we can import and export more tea, which will increase the empire's GDP.
Yes, and we can, of course, thereby oppress more people overseas.
Indeed, by giving them their independence and asking them whether or not they wish to remain a member of the Commonwealth.
Then paying them for their tea.
Yes, providing a market economy, of course. Through it all, nobody has thought to go, hang on, tea is just hot brown slop you dip biscuits in. Well, I don't dip biscuits in my tea, but that's that. Because this is the fear, isn't it? Once we examine tea, we put that central tenet of British culture under the microscope. What? Because liberal values and individualism and the freedom to do what you want is not the central tenet of British culture. It's hot brown slop to dip biscuits in.
With digestive biscuits being dipped into it.
I did get told by an American who had never heard of digestives that sounded disgusting. And I was considering, and I thought, yeah, it's quite funny how the word digestive has now become synonymous with a nice sweet treat, particularly chocolate digestive. And yet, to anyone else, it just sounds like this bizarre thing which you crunch down in order to help your digestion.
My two favorite fake accents, and I find out an hour in, says Sergeant Sniper.
This is the Marvel Staff Sergeant Sniper of the fact that YouTube will record the entirety of the live stream, and once it's been said, it's not gone. And so you're more than welcome to start from the beginning once the stream has begun, once the stream has ended, and finish off where you left off. Here we are. What else shall we start to doubt now that we've cast tea away from the British identity? Gin, which I'm going to need after this. The royal family, dancing dogs on TV talent shows, black pudding, or an inherent hatred of the French. I think, again, more projection there at the end. Given that we don't hate the French, we just recognize them as the surrender monkeys that they are. Once these old cultural keystones are gone, not women's suffrage, not the abolition of slavery, it's tea, the royal family, black pudding, and a hatred of the French. Sans tea, the concept of Englishness can be distilled. See what they did there? Distilled? Down to nothing more than a poster reading, "Keep calm and carry on thinking Wayne Rooney is a slightly better striker than he is." Once again, projection. Without tea, the only thing that demarcates us from the rest of the world are dads who wear fancy dress to international cricket games.
Yes, it's a very sort of strange... It's almost as if he views the British through kind of a lens that is nothing but a stereotype. You know, he's trying to set out as to what is it that makes the people British, and he seems to kind of be laboring under the impression that it's tea and a few other superficial concepts.
Yes, it's very like most of the sort of really lefty silliness. It tends to be very oversimplified, and also hating on something that has very little to do with actual, like, it's not hurting anyone.
Yes, I mean, what I mean is here is a nation that is pretty much, if you look at it, the most successful nation on earth. I mean, I know we're no longer the most powerful nation on earth, but if you actually look at the history of the last few hundred years, yes, you would struggle to find anyone having exerted that much influence on the rest of the globe.
Indeed.
And yet, the only thing that seems to define us is tea, thinking Wayne Rooney is a decent striker, and disliking the French. And you sort of think, well, that shows more about his poverty of appreciation of Britain than it actually does about, you know, anything that it says about Britain or about tea, for that matter.
Yes, not to mention the utter lack of, how should I put it, like gratefulness for the position that we are in today compared to, say, 100 years ago, when, say, things like the Russian Revolution were happening. And you just go, even ignoring the horrendous events of the 20th century, the standard of living was demonstrably, you know, multiples of times worse than it is now. And you go, you know, to the point where the motor car has only been around for basically, 100 years. And you go, well, can you imagine living in the society you do now with only a horse and cart? Because we still used cavalry in World War I and that sort of thing. And you just go, someone who is paid more than the daily wage of basically 70 to 80% of the world to write basically tosh about a British pastime that hurts no one.
Yes, you couldn't really get any more inoffensive.
No, indeed.
people drinking tea. But apparently there's a big problem with it.
Apollo TD says
what this person would say in response to an article of a similar nature about the Japanese tea ceremony, because I somehow have got the feeling we would then get a lot of faux outrage.
Oh, indeed. Apollo TD says, I don't hate the French. I just believe that they are evolutionarily inferior. They have no cricket. They have no master brew, no Spitfires, and no tea. I mean, it's pretty damning right there.
Well, yes. I mean, the lack of tea and the lack of Spitfires is definitely a serious lack on the part of the French, for which I believe they still need to do some accounting.
And Nuno, you say, what the hell is cricket? And I say, you don't want to know. Australia is actually beats us at cricket quite regularly. So,
yes. Well, we let them win.
Yes, of course, as we allow all other nations to win. So it seems like a fair
we're a sporting nation, and when it comes to something like football, and when should we be addressing any Americans out there? We're talking about the proper football, not that football in tight pants where grown men stick their bums in the air and wear motorbike helmets.
You're just trying to lose me, viewers, now.
Oh, yes, of course. When it comes to football like that, I mean, just the sheer effort that a great many other nations put into cheating at playing at that game.
Yes.
It's beholden on us to just basically let them win, because obviously they want it so badly.
Yes.
I mean, once you've seen an Italian go down at the World Cup and then roll again, onwards and onwards, whilst he's putting in an Oscar performance, as in just in how much agony he is.
Oh, yes.
Until he realizes that he has won the free kick. And then he's immediately back on his feet,
jumping like a little
grab
puppy.
The ball because he wants to be the one to actually take the free kick.
The Australians cheat at cricket, as is their nature as convicts.
Ah, yes. I think we're referring to Sandpaper Gate here, aren't we?
Once these old, let me see, without tea, blah, 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 blah. This is it. This is our reality. Big stewing pots of the stuff, types of tea named after earls, chipped mugs with steam rising out of them. Some dickhead saying, it's a bit tanniny, isn't it? I mean, I can only attribute this to the kinds of people that the progressive left hangs out with.
Yes, the chattering classes, I think what we're referring to.
The hipster
I've never heard anyone saying tanniny.
No, the hipster classes who won't accept a simple cup of tea, but demand it to be served in 3 jugs of varying sizes at different temperatures to achieve the perfect combination.
in a glass cup, yes.
Special little teapot-shaped dishes on the side, piled high with old cold tea bags. Well, that's just, efficiency. Special rectangular biscuits designed for dunking. This is our world, awash with a liquid more overrated than oil. Oil runs everything, you stupid idiot. I'm assuming he means the black stuff and not vegetable.
Well, I mean, then again, this is the Groniad we're talking about. So this could well be, extra virgin olive oil we're talking about. Who knows?
It's almost as if he doesn't seem to realize that the machines that run the electric lights in his building, the stuff that goes in his car, the stuff that runs the electric hookup for his electric car, if he has that one, and any other of the number of useful things that make his life basically heaven on earth compared to everywhere else in the world, happens to be run on the fluids that he is describing.
Well, I was actually quite, given that I mentioned Groniad there, I was actually quite content that he had actually put in that typo earlier, where he'd forgot to put the space before the but.
Yes.
Because if you remember, that was actually a running joke with Guardian articles, that they were always full of typos and spelling errors. Hence, they got the nickname, the Groniad. And I believe particularly Private Eye still refers to them unfailingly as the Groniad.
It wouldn't surprise me at all. Goodness. Is tea good? Yes. We never ask. It is not good. It is exactly fine, which is somewhat of a a diversion from where he started, saying it's shit. And liking it is the worst possible English trait, up there with colonialism, the class system, and thinking dentistry is bad. Is this actually an English person writing this? I'm beginning to suspect not.
Yes, yeah. There is what was it called, that comedy film where there was a lengthy gag about British dentistry.
Well, there's lots of gags about British
Austin
dentistry.
Powers, wasn't it?
Oh yes.
Yes, and it went sort of on, and you get the feeling quite a few people make that gag because they've kind of been informed through that film, rather than actually knowing that British dentistry would be any worse than the dentistry in any other part of the European continent.
Indeed, not to mention the fact that the Americans in particular have a rather unnatural approach to dentistry, which is smash all the teeth in and replace them.
Well, yes, but what they forget there is, of course, that is for those people who are in a position to afford that. Whereas I wonder how many Americans have these kind of Hollywood smiles who live in trailer parks.
Indeed, that would be quite funny. Is tea guilt the new form of white guilt, or is tea the cause of white guilt? I think a chronic lack of tea and a chronic overdose of soy are the cause of white guilt. Interesting fact about soy, though, it does contain something called phytoestrogen, and I do wonder how it emasculates young men who drink it.
Well, there is also a question about plastics, is there not? That there is some estrogen-mimicking chemicals that can leach from plastics.
Ooh, that wouldn't surprise me.
So there is some sort of concern that might have also contributed to the drop in sperm count and whatever throughout the Western world, because we're so completely surrounding ourselves with plastic products.
Yes.
Particularly where they're actually in contact with food.
Mm.
That we're actually storing food in plastic containers and so on.
Yes, that'd be. I would like to see a study done on that, but obviously I don't know.
I believe there has actually been some studies in that particular area. Yes,
that might be interesting. No, source for perhaps the next stream. Next time you have a cup of tea and look around you, you are probably surrounded by 3 or 4 mugs of the stuff at various degrees of room temperature, crumbs down your cardigan. Next time you have a cup of tea, as you lift the heavy mug to your mouth, think, is this actually good? Zoom out, analyze, is this nice, or do I just have Stockholm syndrome? And I will do all this for you because you've asked me so nicely. And then I will conclude, yes, it's delicious, and put the kettle on again.
Well, one of the things that strikes me is his experience seems to time and again point to his sitting around and having a lot of time to drink tea and biscuits.
Yes.
And
mainly because he's not doing real work.
Precisely. I was just about to kind of touch upon that, as in kind of how many other people during their working day seem to have quite this amount of time for rest. It kind of seems to suggest something about the very writer himself.
Mm.
It's kind of, it couldn't be more middle class, this particular article, could it, if it tried.
Really couldn't. Shall we have a look at the first 100 comments, just for amusement's sake? This postmodern hatred for every single popular thing has to stop. Make tea, not war. Let's see. This article is thin gruel indeed, and decidedly not my cup of tea.
Well, Ronnie Barker still is alive, I see. Yes.
Yes. Actually, it has made me feel quite cozy. Leaf it out. Tries to think of another tea-related pun. Bollocks. If you don't like tea...
As it actually was in a certain sketch.
If you don't like tea because your palate is dead, tittle off to Starbucks. Who cares? The most pleasant, refreshing beverage on the planet is tea. It's like, and not to mention the fact that it appears that Kisbot here is a contributor or was at that point, because the next comment says, not sure how far your career in journalism will go if you refer to your fellow contributors as trolls. So we can only assume, and rest in peace, Kizbot, that they were removed as a contributor purely because they made this comment and trolled their fellow contributors.
Well, of course. I mean, what worse could you do? I mean, you could perhaps, if you disagree with fellow contributors, the only worst sin that you could possibly make would be criticize Diane Abbott or Jeremy Corbyn in public.
Oh, don't make me think of Diane Abbott. It's disgusting.
Well, in that case, try and imagine Diane Abbott enjoying a warm cup of tea.
I think she would become a different person. I think she would drain. She's already so full of already so full of bile and disgusting thoughts that she's swollen up with them. Somewhat like Violet Beauregard out of Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. And I can only imagine that if she were to sit down, have a cup of tea, they would all drain out of her in a great sort of expulsion.
Here's a question. Consider the politician. So think of Diane Abbott, and we'll just assume with each one of these politicians, cup of tea, milk, possibly a lump of sugar or not, depending on whichever preference. But now tell me, what biscuit? So Diane Abbott, tea and what?
See, Diane Abbott strikes me as a custard cream type girl.
Or, to be honest, more than likely the packet of custard cream. Then you've got Jeremy Corbyn.
Oh, you know those sort of giant custard creams that you can get, the novelty ones.
Oh, yes.
Basically the size of a small coffee table.
Yes, the size of a cake, yes. So a packet of those then, yes. Jeremy Corbyn, what would he be?
He's definitely a rich tea. I just see he's such a thin, spindly man, and he deserves a thin, spindly biscuit.
Then okay, so let's change it's cross the floor and go for Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Ooh. Let me see. Can we just Staff Sergeant Cypher says, can we please not talk about them? I'm sure this analogy will come. But what do you think Jacob Rees-Mogg would do?
Bath Oliver.
Ooh. Yes, definitely.
Then John McDonnell, the ultimate socialist. What is the ultimate socialist's biscuit?
I believe that he would probably, having not seen biscuits that get dipped in tea before in his entire life due to his socialist convictions, he would probably dip something obscene like a mini cheddar.
Yes, well played. And then, of course, we've got Boris Johnson. Now, it would have to be something.
It has to be something flamboyant. He has to have a party ring.
Would he go for the chocolate Bath Oliver? I mean, those are just about the most expensive biscuits you could possibly get.
Perhaps if you got that and layered on a good layer of gold leaf.
If I recall correctly, John Lennon loved them and actually did a concert once on the condition that he would be paid in chocolate Bath Olivers.
That's for people who don't know what a Bath Oliver is.
Yes, but if you call up a chocolate Bath Oliver, you will see it's quite a different animal. So that's a kind of cracker / biscuit, isn't it? And if you look at the chocolate Bath Oliver, they're just about the most lavish thing you can envisage.
Indeed.
Oh yeah, and there is John Lennon. Yes, just to confirm the
plans to revive his favourite biscuits. Oh, that is rather rich, isn't it?
Yeah, so I see that as being the Boris Johnson biscuit. So the dry kind of, the rather dry kind of biscuit, that I would see as Jacob Rees-Mogg, whereas the kind of over-the-top, lavish chocolate Bath Oliver, I would see as Boris Johnson.
See, this is what I see as Boris Johnson.
Yes, I can see which way you're going there.
Utterly flamboyant. I mean, this is the biscuit of a man who would use the insult, "You great supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies."
So what he would do is he would wear those as rings and then nibble on them as he would go. Yes.
See, now you're just thinking of oh, his name is completely gone out of my mind. The guy who composed the soundtrack for The Lion King.
Elton John.
Elton John, yes. That's what I can imagine Elton John with these as rings on his fingers. Goodness. Bella M, who is Guardian staff, says tea is awful and everyone should drink coffee. This has 40 upvotes. And the next comment saying, "You're making it wrong, my dear," has 240. Which is saying, chocolate digestive thins for Moggy, Philip Mason says.
Okay, chocolate digestive thins. Yes, I can, yeah.
I can also see that. What biscuit would Sir Humphrey Appleby eat?
I would say one of those kind of shortbread biscuits.
Yes, I was just about to say the shortbread with currants in it. You could definitely see him doing that. Sort of just enough dried fruit, but not too much.
It would definitely have to be a very bespoke kind of
the kind of biscuits that he could lord. The kind of biscuit he could lord over his co-workers, of which he has a special supply in his drawer just for him.
Yes, which everyone else is permitted to watch him consume, but no one is allowed to touch. Yes,
indeed. Let me see. You're entitled to your opinion, and nobody should force you to drink one cup of what you do not like. But coffee makes me throw up. My opinion against yours. No winner, no loser.
Well, I mean, how are you with coffee?
See, I don't mind it when I am in the mood for it, but I drink so much tea nowadays, and I never used to be a tea drinker either. But really, in the last few years, I've just become a teaholic, effectively.
Well, I don't like coffee, but I love the smell of it. The scent of coffee, I think, is beautiful.
Very rich, isn't it?
The scent of it is wonderful, but actually to drink it, I find that sort of very arduous.
Is someone feeling a bit sad today? And then this comment was removed by a moderator because it didn't abide by our community standards. This comment was removed by a moderator. This comment was removed. I quite like
whoever thought that there would be that much controversy possible on an article about tea.
I love that one of the comments was removed by someone called Grawn, with an upside down standard picture from The Guardian.
But you need to ask yourself, how sad has your life become once you are a moderator for a comment section on a Guardian article about tea?
See, I think they're all volunteers for the most part, which is quite sad because you've actually got to be noticed and then do their job for them for free.
Of course.
I quite like tea, and for some reason halfway through the article I was thinking about how much I don't want to go to my dentist appointment tomorrow. Now, where did I put my Union Jack hanky and my deck chair?
Oh,
we have now hit peak Guardian. This and Miss Valenti's opus on the feminism of Mad Max confirm it for me. This is jumping the shark of self-parody, and I too am getting my deck chair out. It's just, oh dear. This comment was removed by a moderator. Your opinion of why tea is awful boils down to your appalling family upbringing, having a nana that couldn't follow the basics in making a good cup of tea.
I love it how you inserted appalling family upbringing when there was no actual. That adjective was not in there actually.
I was hoping that you wouldn't draw attention to that, but I tend to make the comments more flowery and entertaining because it's if I was writing them, what would I add in? In the same way that I condense some things which I think are a bit droll. I wonder if Farage has stopped drinking beer long enough to have a favourite tea. I have no doubt that he nurses his hangover with a cup of tea.
Yes, I think Farage would be the Builder's Brew type.
Oh, definitely.
And what kind of a biscuit are we thinking of here?
Nigel Farage is definitely a plain digestive kind of man.
Is he? I would have thought he would be something like a chocolate hobnob.
Also possible, but I don't know whether or not he would appreciate the idea of being associated with the word knob.
Or would it be one of those? I've never fancied them particularly. Those chocolatey ones, the bourbons.
Oh yes, my brother he adores them, and I am really not a massive fan. Not that I have a particular distaste for them. I just have no particular, I'm not particularly drawn to them either.
Yeah, for any Americans listening, this must be absolutely shocking to kind of listen to people kind of go through the details of just how many different types of biscuits there are. But trust me, it is a great part of the kind of tea ceremony that is Britishness.
We have here the wokest comment on this thread. What else are we going to start doubting, in quotes? I've got my doubts about multiculturalism and this mass immigration thing.
Well, it's actually remarkable that the moderator left that post standing, is it not?
Indeed. Is tea good? It's all fine. Tea is the problem. Nana, contributor. Grandma is the posh one. Nana is for the prole scum. Have you never seen the royal family? That's basically mine, and we both had Nana. This article is insulting to many much-loved nanas, yes. This is a slow bruise day. Oh, dear. Coffee is a fair weather friend, the cat of the beverage world, and tea is always good at any time in any situation, and it will always make you feel better. The mutt of beverages. I mean, I don't agree. I would place tea above coffee. And I would say definitely tea is not... As this person, I prefer tea to coffee. Never ask for tea in a country where tea drinking isn't the norm.
Yes, very much so.
And never ask for it in an Italian cafe in London. See, the only coffee that I've truly enjoyed has to be a Vietnamese coffee. And a Vietnamese coffee is one of the...
awfully specific.
It is, right? So it's awfully hipster of me, but basically a Vietnamese coffee is a layer probably about 3/4 of an inch thick of condensed milk, and then the espresso on top, like the black coffee, very, very strong, very bitter. Now it smells gorgeous, as you've alluded to, and then you drink a little bit of it, and either it comes with a spoon. And so you get this really bitter flavor, and then you use the spoon to get a little bit of the condensed milk out the bottom, and then you have that in between sips. And so you end up with this sort of real contrast of very bitter, very sweet, very bitter, very sweet. And then when you get sort of either bored of that or you want to, it's becoming more lukewarm, you swirl your spoon and mix the condensed milk in, and you drink the last bit, the last half usually, which is a very sweet coffee. And that's one of those things that I've actually managed to enjoy.
Well, there you go. We've learned something. Someone here points out the Apollo TD says Farage would be Fox's biscuits and bourbons are terrific. Now, is that Mr. Apollo TD? Is that because of the panda bear with the gangster accent that advertises Fox's biscuits? I wonder.
Gangster, quite possibly. Another classic of the I don't like it, so it shouldn't exist genre. Not quite up there with the bloke who wished to ban urinals because he was too shy to use them. It seems you're a little bit down. Never mind, I'll put the kettle on. We'll have a lovely cup of tea and maybe a Garibaldi biscuit. If you're lucky.
Now there we are. The Garibaldi biscuit. Whom do we ascribe that to?
Let me see. Just for chats. There you go. It's like a fig. Yes, filled with currants and that sort of thing. Gorgeous. Now, see, I could see Theresa May with a Garibaldi biscuit as she runs through a field of wheat.
Away from the machine guns. Yes.
Indeed. Not a care in the world.
Who would be the jammy dodger?
Again, that's something that you could also attribute to Boris,
yes.
But that I'm much more likely to attribute that to. Now, what's his name? Oh, for goodness sake. It's gone completely out of my mind now. A rather rotund man, but that could describe a great many politicians.
Nicholas Soames.
Probably, yes, that's the one. Nicholas Soames, I would establish.
He was actually related to Churchill, was he not?
He certainly looks it.
I think he was somehow his grandson or something like that. I think he was kind of directly related somehow to Churchill.
I have no idea the history of Mr. Soames. Staff Sergeant Sniper says, I cannot bring myself to describe how much rage I'm feeling at what you just described being called coffee. It's coffee with other things. So there you go. All that anger aside, as an American, is Twinings a decent brand? Because it's all I can get in my store here.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. And the Britisher has good taste in this regard.
It has the royal warrant on it. So basically it says by appointment to Her Majesty the Queen. So Twinings, I believe, supplies the royal household. So if it's good enough for them, it should more than likely be good enough for some colonials over yonder.
Indeed. Normally when articles...
That's snooty enough on my part.
I think just enough, man. Normally when articles aren't serious, they're meant to be funny. But this just wasn't funny. Let's just say it's not my cup of tea. Well, now that we've seen the disgrace that tea is, I have a couple of other articles which I'm sure we'll get through a little bit faster, talking about people who drink tea being more creative, because you can obviously more creative than the people who write articles about how they don't like tea.
How tea is horrible. Yes,
indeed. Yet another reason to reach for the afternoon cuppa, which comes just after the early afternoon cuppa, just after the lunchtime cuppa, after the brunch time cuppa, after the second breakfast cuppa, after the breakfast cuppa, after the I've just woken up cuppa from the tea's made. Yes. Tea improves mental clarity and focus, which bolsters our creative juices, a new study claims. Researchers put the benefits to the nation's favorite hot beverage, containing both caffeine and theanine, which improve attentiveness and alertness. Both effects can be felt within minutes of finishing the beverage. Let me see. They conducted 2 tests on 50 students who had an average age of 23. Half were given a cup of black tea to drink, and the other half were given a glass of water before testing their cognitive and creative skills. So what I'm seeing here, apart from the fact that this is an appallingly unrepresentative study of 25 students versus 25 students, yes, I assume of varying ability. So this could have come out any which way. But they had the participants build an attractive, creative construction out of building blocks, whilst the second required them to invent a cool name for a fictional noodle restaurant. The results were judged on creativity by other students who had not taken part.
A cool name for a fictional noodle restaurant. Yes. Could one get any more obscure than that?
The Apollo TD says Soames is the grandson of Churchill. And that Jordan Peterson would disapprove of tea drinking due to the chaos that creativity creates. See, Jordan Peterson believes in straddling the line between order and chaos. So if you're too ordered, simply drink some tea, and it will guide you towards that line between chaos and order.
Yes, I mean, looking at this article, you wonder whether, do you even still wonder, or you're just convinced that the Beatles must have drunk tea?
Yes, they did tea all the time. They inject.
So must Isambard Kingdom Brunel.
Indeed, they inject so much tea into them that it's a wonder that they live. If you catch my drift, tea in tablet form, tea in everything. On average, tea drinkers scored 6.54, whilst water drinkers scored 6. It's not even a large derivation. It's like you've averaged half a percentage point.
This is on the basis of 25 people.
Of 25 people on each side.
This is highly scientific.
And in the restaurant, although I was surprised, do you know the average size? What is considered to be the size for a reputable study?
Go ahead, tell me.
It's 1,000 people.
Okay. Yep.
Which is considered to be a representative study, dependent on how you've selected your candidates, of course.
That is, of course, until you hit the meta study, which is one of my personal pet hates.
Do tell.
Well, the meta study is when you basically take several other studies together. So you analyze the overall, the overall analysis of previous studies. So you bundle them all up. So you may look at 30 studies which would have included 1,000 subjects, and now you claim your study to be looking at 30,000 subjects.
That's rubbish.
But of course, the reason the meta study is open for so much abuse is that what you put in it is what you get out. So yes. Let's assume you want to prove that smoking causes, I don't know, cancer of the big toe, Well, are you going to include any of the studies that kind of show that there is absolutely no evidence to that amount? No. So you're going to perhaps, just for form's sake, include one or two such studies. But then everything else is going to be packed tight with studies that confirm your point.
Indeed. Yes. It's
therefore, it is one of the truly worst forms of study there is. So I say this to people over and over again. If you are confronted with one of these kind of studies that people like to throw around in debates, if it says meta study, just dismiss it out of hand.
Indeed. It suffers so heavily from confirmation bias. Here we are. The findings suggest from these 25 people that tea boosted creativity in both tests, and leaving researchers to conclude that the hot beverage improves overall. So they only did one test as well.
Yes.
They've only done or two tests in one.
You forget, this study is on our side. So we completely concur with this. And we think this is highly scientific.
This is highly scientific. In fact, these results can be extrapolated out to the global population, not even just the nation in which these people come from. The participants noted that participants consumed a very small amount of tea in study, and therefore, no, we're ignoring that paragraph.
No. I mean, the reason why it is only 0.5%, 0.51% divergent is because they only consumed a small amount of tea.
Oh yeah, so of course.
It would have confirmed our thoughts yet more had they drunk more tea.
If they were on their fourth or fifth cup of the day, I mean, they're reaching really high IQ.
Yes, I mean, then they're beginning to. I was almost about to say genius level, but what I'm wanting to say is then they're at average British level.
Philip Mason says, a nice cup of tea, the essay by Orwell, gives details on English tea ritual being one of the mainstays of civilization.
Well, so there you go. Philip Mason has thereby confirmed to us that vernaculus agrees with us.
2 biological ingredients, caffeine and theanine, have beneficial effects on attention, an indispensable part of cognitive function, and so on and so forth. There is no reason why you can't cite the study to legitimize your 4-cup-a-day habit. 4 cups a day, those are rookie numbers, man.
Oh, really? This is amateur level. Yes.
You've got to push those numbers up. Any comment?
What I was wanting to point out earlier on was this. And once again, I have no idea when I picked up this snippet of information. But apparently, the first kind of million inhabitant cities were effectively London and I believe it was Tokyo or one of the other Japanese cities.
Yes.
And this is if we leave out ancient Rome, which obviously had its own exceptions in that regard. And one of the reasons one thinks it was actually possible to have those cities at such a scale is because the inhabitants drank tea.
Amazing.
Because it has a slight antiseptic property. And one of the problems all the past civilizations found was that once cities grew beyond a certain scale, diseases started to immediately
because of the
population numbers again.
The rodents and the hazard, shall we say, of living in such the word I am looking for is, it means that you're living close to it.
Proximity?
In proximity, for goodness sake, yes. in such proximity to human waste and refuse and that sort of thing, given that sewage was
so
not really a thing.
by drinking, by consuming a considerable amount of a beverage that was very cheap for both those civilizations, and at the same time had certain antiseptic properties, that enabled them to actually crack that glass ceiling and grow very big cities.
I mean, this is why this in combination. I mean, most other nations had discovered alcohol. So, for instance, in feudal Britain, of course, everyone was perpetually. I hesitate to say tipsy, but you would drink light beer because it was safer to drink than water. And tea, but of course, the brewing process for beer contains a lot of bacteria as well. So it was very easy if you got it wrong, shall we say, or if around the product itself when you're making it, that it would be a less effective motivator than tea in cities. And there you go. Staff Sergeant.
Sorry, go ahead.
Staff Sergeant Sniper says Britisher random fact generator is a go.
Well, there you go. Well, since I'm at random fact generating, I don't know if anyone is familiar with the comic book Asterix, which, particularly on the continent, it's literally a Bible. I believe it is one of the most translated works that you can find on planet Earth.
I probably have a copy upstairs somewhere.
It is translated into an enormous amount of languages and dialects, including, I believe, ancient Greek and Latin. So actually, some teachers use it to kind of jolly up their Latin classes a bit and whatever, because obviously you've got these ancient characters and they're talking Latin. But I believe when, Asterix is this kind of Gallic little hero who's almost a kind of independence fighter in Gaul against the Romans. And, in every one of the comic books, he goes to a different place. And it's inevitable that at one point he goes to Britain.
Yes.
And the reason his little village has managed to maintain independence against the, insurmountable Roman army is because they have a magic potion, which their druid concocts.
Right.
And on hearing that there is a little village that is being besieged in Britain by the invading Roman forces, they volunteer to send them a barrel of this magic potion.
Right.
So Asterix and his friend Obelix then set out to Britain to take this barrel to the village so they can fight off the Romans. While he is in the druid's sort of cavern, he sees all sorts of things lying about, and he sees some leaves and asks the druid, well, what are these? And is told, well, I don't know. It's something that some Phoenician trader brought. And I'm just sort of experimenting with it to see what it is. But by all means, help yourself. I've got plenty of it. So he kind of puts a bundle of the stuff in his pocket. Well, on the way to Britain and whatever, with the Romans being a fairly formidable foe, they manage to destroy the barrel. So when the two Gauls alone actually eventually arrive at the village, he needs to very quickly kind of bluff his way through because they haven't got the magic potion anymore, so they'll have to make do with something else. Yes. So obviously he remembers the bundled up leaves in his pocket and produces them and says, well, I know how to make the magic potion myself. The druid has taught me. All you need is these herbs. So they boil up a pot of hot water and he throws in the leaves and there you are. Well, it's the ultimate bluff because the Britons are sufficiently convinced that they're invincible.
Yes.
That they then basically go and defeat the Romans anyway, even though they never had any superior strength whatsoever.
Yes.
When that after the battle is then revealed to the chieftain of the Britons, he says, oh, I don't care what it is. Let me know and I shall make it the national drink. And of course, by the time he gets back home, the druid has since found out what these leaves are, and it is indeed tea. Yes.
Amazing. Well, there you go. There's a factoid for you, chat there. What have you missed, Dominic? You have missed us talking about tea. We have talked about the French. We have talked about cheese, yes.
Biscuits, and we've ascribed biscuits to politicians.
Yes, in a more fun way than Academic Agent would, because AA creates his own personal cabinet, and we create our own biscuit cabinet, just by our own discussion. So just a few bits and pieces there. Although we've been live for a while now, haven't we? We've been.
Yes, I think we have been on for some time now. Yes.
Good thing I've got a couple of things to go through as well. This one here, waste tea leaf extract, offers hope of lung cancer treatment after accidental discovery.
Take that, Guardian.
Tea is clearly terrible and on a par with colonialism, offering hope. Although I suppose colonialism led to the empire, and the empire led to democracy, and democracy led to, or at least liberalism. And the Enlightenment, and therefore we are responsible for lung cancer treatments overall.
Well, there you go.
The capitalist system. How's that bit for a bit of
more pith helmets for everyone is what I say.
More pith helmets. So extract from waste tea leaves providing.
Let's do the ultimate leap. Pith helmets cure lung cancer.
And that's why you don't have lung cancer, isn't it?
Of course, yes.
Correlation equals causation. But they're saying it's surprising, and they've discovered.
I think we've just found another t-shirt slogan, haven't we?
Yes, pith helmets cure lung cancer. But basically, they're saying that tea and excess tea that we wouldn't drink basically helps cure lung cancer. Someone says, "I think I will add some PG tips to my roll-ups now." Which obviously counteracts. So if you smoke in the cancer, then the PG tips will take it away.
Of course.
Kill it at the same time.
It might actually already begin combating it within the roll-up, long before the roll-up is actually lit.
And let me see and then we have the terrible news. Brexit it will drive up the cost of tea by up to 50%. Price of an 80 kilogram bag of tea, which is the usual amount for a British person to buy, I will state.
Of course.
You know, everyone has an 80 kilo bag of tea. You know, it's not enough. It has to be a person and a half.
Well, that's why at the entrance of every Tesco supermarket, there are all those forklift trucks.
Indeed. To lift the forks and the tea. That sort of thing. Going off to watch BBC Question Time now, Pip. Nice to see you, Apollo TD. Hope to see you on the next one. Staff Sergeant Sniper, they also taught me about the Twinings brand. Yes, we did. We taught you Twinings is good and has a royal warrant attached to it. The cost of tea is set to increase due to the consequences of Brexit, according to Thai Fu. Now, I don't drink Thai Fu.
Yes, but I'm a bit surprised at this, because Brexit hasn't reduced the value of the pound by 50%. So how do they arrive at this?
Nor do we impose tariffs, and most of our tea is imported as it is anyway.
Well, it's not like are you familiar with any homegrown tea?
Well, I'm sure there are some, bespoke greenhouses in places, but I'm not aware of the tea fields of Sussex, for instance, which sprawl across the downs. The cost has increased due to the fall in value of sterling, which dropped by something like 8% and then has stabilized.
Well, no, I think it was considerably more than 8%. I think it might be been about twice that amount. So it was about 15%, I think.
Fair enough. But how 15 translates to
50? Yes.
Are we sure that the person who is interviewing the head of Thai Food Tea heard them correctly and conflated 15 with 50?
It's possible.
But the price has gone up from 100 to 150 pounds, and is costing the company 250,000 a month. Have they not considered that it might be things on their end and not ours? We are really suffering. It's come to the point where it's not sustainable, and we cannot accept this loss. Typhoon. I am pretty sure that's supposed to be Thai Fu.
Yes, it's not the RAF drink with their latest aircraft.
The F-35. That makes no sense whatsoever, British Air. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, let's assume the previous model was some American rip-off that more than likely doesn't work properly anyway.
Typhoon tea. I would love to drink a typhoon. I don't know about you, but if you could have tea in a typhoon, like, and can you imagine the great ships that they would have sailed?
That would be the British thing to do, wouldn't it? That basically you're in the middle of a typhoon. If you are on a ship or if you are on land, so basically either the ship is falling about your ears or the house around you, and you're still sitting there and you're still enjoying your cup of tea and you are refusing to be flustered.
Indeed. Dominic says they should have warned us before the referendum. If only they'd had that on the side of a bus, I mean, honestly, but I just have this phenomenal image, sort of like a Monty Python sketch, something utterly surreal, or the Edge Chronicles, if anyone's read that. If anyone's feeling creative, I would genuinely buy a story or a book or a painting of a vessel that is venturing forth into the through the forests of tea to get to the tea typhoon and to collect the liquid tea that ravages the land. Can you imagine, like, great wooden galleons that go in and from the 18th century having to swing great nets of tea catching?
I'm rather thinking of it in terms of a kind of an airship that approaches it from above and then kind of lowers a pipe down to kind of draw it up.
Like some sort of great tea oil rig.
We're really sort of in Jules Verne territory here.
Yes. I adore the idea that you have like all these people running up and down rigging with tea kettles and teapots collecting the tea which is flying around. But I adore your airship thing. Perhaps we could have the mechanization of tea collection over time, and that could be the main brunt of the story. I would genuinely.
So the airship was then later followed up by the hovercraft.
Notoriously difficult to control, but the suction power was unparalleled.
So with obviously now the hovercraft having fallen from use, what would it be now?
Well, it wouldn't be the helicopter because they're all caught up killing the communists for AA.
Of course, yes.
But I could easily see, those great aircraft that fly over fields and spray the fertilizer.
Okay, yeah, the crop dusters.
Yeah, crop dusters. I feel like like a reverse crop duster.
It
swoops down.
It's a kind of Kim sucker. Yes,
it skims the storm, and then returns home. I just and then you can have it in a mug.
I think this stream is taking a slightly surreal note, don't you?
Do you care? That's the question. Do you not love this idea? I mean, I would watch it.
Well, this is more than likely how Through the Looking Glass was written. It's kind of a sort of tea-induced psychosis. Yes.
Oh yes, back when tea had similar effects to LSD before the 60s neutered it. Yes. Anyway, Typhoon Tea produces 125 million tea bags per week at its. I mean, that's enough to supply 5 people at its factory in Wigan. And
that's more than likely the factory that supplies Wigan. That's what they're trying to say.
Yes, of course. And employs 300 people. If the pound continues to decline at the rate it has, the business will lose all of its profit. So it's still turning a profit.
Well, you see, what we are looking for, what we've got now to look forward to, is once the second referendum comes along, which inevitably is going to come along due to the clamour for it, is we are going to have the Remainers in front of a massive double-decker bus with the claim, with the independent headline that indeed tea has become 50% more expensive because of Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
And that it is costing the nation, I don't know, just by chance, £350 million per year, just in additional tea bill for the NHS.
And this is quite a short article, basically bemoaning things. Someone is talking about loving coffee and saying buy coffee, And someone says, anyone arguing that companies using Brexit to push up prices doesn't understand basic economics. You voted for higher prices. You should live with it. And someone said, let's see what this actually means. I just weighed one tea bag, 1 gram. An 80-kilo bag is 80,000 tea bags. 50 pounds divided by 80,000 is 0.06 pence. So if this is all you Ramonas have to sneer at Brexit, say no more. I am quite happy to pay 6/100ths of a penny on a price of a cup of tea to regain back 800 years of Magna Carta.
Oh, yeah, William the Marshal must have been an avid tea drinker, of course.
That is strong. And someone said, so you think one bag of tea...
I'm familiar with him because he is related to the Magna Carta.
Sorry, who did you say?
William the Marshal, or William Marshall.
Now, I looked into the Magna Carta last year, but I cannot remember for the life of me.
William Marshall is generally regarded as more than likely the greatest knight of all times.
Okay.
I mean, he was early on, I think he already helped save Eleanor of Aquitaine. He unhorsed Richard the Lionheart, which is a claim, which is quite a claim to fame, because Richard the Lionheart was quite a knight in his own right.
Indeed, it was just a flesh wound.
He was part of the rebellion against King John. And when King John then refused to, because King John signed the Magna Carta, but then renounced it.
Oh, really? Yes, I recall.
Then the young king, which was only a child, comes to the throne, and clearly the young king needed a protector of sorts, particularly because enemies were already rising all over the place, because they saw it's only a kid on the throne. We can take this on, you know. The French, of course, immediately organized an invasion, as they do.
As there's their want.
Here was this kid, you know, basically asking for help. Now, at that moment, William the Marshal could simply have taken the throne for himself. But he basically, again, the most honourable knight you can possibly imagine, he basically pledged himself to the king and organised an army and went to beat the French. And by that time, I mean, you know, we are talking the days when if you led an army, you actually physically led an army into battle.
You were at the head of it.
Yes, and at that time he was already about 70 years old.
Amazing. I would vote to bring that back.
Yes,
because I would love to see John Prescott running at the front of it.
French, and I think because he was effectively the protector of the king, they effectively made him reign the country until the king was of sufficient age. So he became the first Lord Protector.
Like a regent
that Cromwell later used. But his being now in charge of England, he then published Magna Carta. So the document which King John had signed unwillingly, then no sooner was he free of the nobles, he immediately renounced. He was the one who then officially published it once King John was no more and he was in charge. So effectively, it was William Marshall who published Magna Carta.
So don't ever say, chat, that you don't ever learn something from these streams.
And if you actually, you know, when there's the state opening of Parliament, and the Queen sits on her throne, if you look closely, you know, in this kind of neo-Gothic architecture, there are around that room several knights on top of pillars. The knight that is immediately to the right hand of the monarch on the throne is the statue of William Marshall. Amazing. So basically, they've pretty much set him in stone as the right hand of the monarch. I believe he's in what's it called? You know, the Temple Church. The Temple Church, you know, in the legal district off Fleet Street in London.
Yes,
that's where he is entombed, and I believe his the church was actually struck by a bomb, and part of the roof fell in or whatever, and slightly damaged his. It's kind of with those medieval tombs. It's like a lying knight, if you know what I mean.
Like a mausoleum.
So he's got a bit of a chink out of him, but he's still there. So even the German bombs couldn't beat him.
Huh. I love the fact that St. Paul's Cathedral in London was never hit with a bomb because the German planes used it too often as a point of reference and couldn't afford to destroy it.
I still think they more than likely did aim for it because everything around St. Paul's was destroyed. And I believe there was one incendiary device that actually hit St. Paul's. And some chaps actually climbed up St. Paul's and dislodged it.
Amazing.
So I think there was some damage, but it could have been a lot greater had one allowed this thing to explode and burn on top of St. Paul's.
I have changed my mind, Britisher, about what I want to do with you once you've passed away. What I want to happen, because by that time, of course, all education will be done via screen. Via the telescreens, if we keep going the way we're going, and what I need to do is plug your brain into the network, so that you can disseminate information to the public. Well, because you just are an insane hotbed of just interesting facts.
If you like that particular fact, wasn't there also some? Perhaps Philip Mason can confirm this because I see his in the chat, and he's definitely the sort of chap who will know this. Wasn't there some public attempt also made for the Victory when Portsmouth docks were on fire?
Oh.
That a considerable part of the population kind of went down to the docks and pretty much formed chains handing over buckets and whatever, because Victory wasn't hit, but everything around her was pretty much ablaze.
Yes. No one cared for the Mary Rose.
So well, the Mary Rose was still underwater at that time.
Still underwater, but I'm making a terrible joke.
But yes, they went down there because Victory was in danger, and because it was such a symbol of national pride that during the war it was kind of seen as, look, we can't let her burn.
Yes.
Just in the same way as someone would be daft enough to climb up St. Paul's Cathedral in order to dislodge an incendiary bomb.
Yes, whilst it's still ticking.
Amazing. A bit like Captain Mannering and Sergeant Wilson when they've got the bomb in their lap in the vault.
It's almost
with that scene, are you?
You just need Benny Hill music in the background, and that's. Staff Sergeant Sniper says, according to the Telegraph, you have a small plantation for tea in Cornwall.
Oh well, there you go.
There you are. See, local tea. I did the best tea I've.
So there is actually such a thing as literal British tea.
Indeed, I do have the best tea I've ever actually brought back with me from a place. I went to Kenya, and I had some gold standard Kenyan tea bagged fresh for me. From the and obviously it's been dried, etc. at the factory, but I was in the region where it was all being picked and then processed, ready to go, and so you could get fresh Kenyan tea, as it were, in boxes. And I bought back about 40 bags, and that served me very well for about 3 days.
I'm just putting something in the side chat here for you to see.
Oh yes,
if you hit that, because that seems to be the Cornish tea we're talking about.
Let's have a look. Tregothnan, the first ever British tea company to have created a range of black and green teas homegrown on British soil. Cornish tea with the finest Assam and Darjeeling.
So there you go, Tregothnan tea. I had no idea that this existed, but there you are.
Look at that box, though. It's marvellous. Utterly marvellous. And Spitfire tea as well.
Spitfire tea. Now, can this get any better?
Spitfire tea, a celebration of the brave men and women who protected us since the first RAF planes 100 years ago. The iconic Spitfire was a symbol of British strength. We have blended this bold, malty English RAF 100 tea. Please sponsor me, Tregothnan. Like, I will drink your tea on stream. I will put my camera on and have the box there always.
Yes, I can imagine that the three of us, your good self, myself, and of course also the squire, if you are familiar with him.
I am not.
Yeah, in that case, do check him out. He does kind of comedic computer game routines, which kind of burst with Englishness or Britishness, for that matter. He's well worth a watch, and yes, you cannot get more British in that regard. I mean, he is the chap who will be sitting in the Spitfire in the computer game, and when he sees the Jerry arriving in his Messerschmitt, will shout "Tally ho" before turning in.
Philip Mason asks, is the taste of tea affected by the cup one drinks it from? For example, Chinese porcelain versus Hornsey or Yorkshire bog standard.
I think if you are drinking it from a decent cup, the cup won't really exude a taste of its own. But there are some cups that can, if they're not glazed and things like that.
I think so. This robust Spitfire tea is the kind of brew that would have kept our troops hydrated and motivated for action. Set on the banks of the River Farle, from which the D-Day landings embarked, Tregothnan shares a great history with the RAF. I mean, that's strong. I mean, I'm sold. Single estate.
Was this information worth my passing on to you?
Indeed, yes. This all goes straight. Look. See, I'm favoriting to the bookmarks bar.
Well, it's all down to was it the staff sergeant who told us this, or am I getting people mixed up in the chat?
Told you about what?
About there being, according to the Telegraph, Cornish tea.
He did indeed, and he says that I have taught the fact generator my day is made.
Well, there you go. See, no, we are definitely enriched by your knowledge, Staff Sergeant.
Let me see. Like this tea price going up thing. I mean, Essex Boy says the price in tea per kilo was £2.27 in 2011, and in 2014 it's now dropped to £1.75. And so they're talking about there's no profiteering here, is there? Oh no, Brexit is making us jump our prices. Oh no.
Yeah, by 50%.
By 50%. Oh,
the pound has dropped past 50.
We'll only charge an extra 35%, but you understand we're actually taking a loss here. Oh, not to mention the fact that prices in Lidl and everything dropping, and an amazing set of things. I love this. Price gouging only works if you get away with it. Stop losing it and stop lying. Amazing. And here you thought that I wouldn't be able to fill an entire stream with tea talk.
Well, yes, I did express my doubts at the beginning. Yes, I will confess to that. Yes,
and yes, but somehow we've managed to accrue over 2 hours.
Well, we fleshed it out with cheese, biscuits, and eventually Tregothnan tea.
Indeed. Oh, it's an all-encompassing...
biggest plug they've ever received online.
It's all-encompassing. All 8 people who have liked my video.
Oh, well, yeah, but you're forgetting the hundreds and hundreds who will eventually come to visit this.
Oh, indeed.
Once your channel has become bigger than that of Sargon of Akkad's. Which will be in a week or two, I'm assuming.
Oh, of course. If I double every day, then I can only assume that it's a certainty. Of course, your channel, you'll have to join me there. Have you reached 20,000 people yet?
No, I am kind of tickling the very boundary of it. I'm kind of inching my way towards it in a very frustrating manner. But basically, I jumped this weekend. Well, I say weekend, my weekend in that regard is sort of Sunday, Monday, due to, the week that was.
Oh, yes. Your
so
hard
I jumped
deadline.
there by, I think on one day about 88 upwards. So you were sort of thinking, oh, well, yeah, this 20,000 barrier is definitely coming close very swiftly. And then, of course, the next day you grow by 9. just to kind of cool your ardor a bit and go, no, don't get too excited, mate. This is still going to take a while before you get there. I am pretty close by now.
What I find funny is that I've got a like my latest video, which I believe you've watched, about a liberal response to Islam and Tommy Robinson and Tommy Robinson features very little in the video, but he's a stepping stone onto obviously the wider issue and the primary reason for his motivation. But on the offset of that, I gained, I think it was something like 15 subscribers, which is quite a lot for me for a single video. Most of my subscribers come from when I do a stream on another channel.
Yeah, like, you do realize you once in a while you hit on a subject and suddenly you gain more subscribers through that. But then in that way, in the same way that you can gain those, you can also lose them.
Indeed. So, but what I'm saying is that the mainstay of my subscriber count comes from jumping on V's stream, jumping on Unpopular Opinions with yourself and the agent and other things. Although my recent content has done quite well, and obviously I enjoy having you guys on.
Well, I mean, I would say about a third of my subscribers are more than likely from Sargon.
Oh, really? Does he plug you as well?
He once asked me to put up provide him with a clip when he was on holiday.
So amazing.
So he had a few people who provided him with clips that week. So there was about 3 or 4 clips that went up that week onto his channel, even though he wasn't making any content.
I have, I don't know. Sargon has liked. I was having a chat with him, and he liked one of my videos, one of the appalling ones, right from near the beginning, and instantly I had 2 subscribers at that point, which are probably friends.
Well, and I mean, the hardest bits really with starting a channel is kind of getting off the very ground. So if there is anything, even just a like by Sargon or something like that, get from zero to having something, because
he
noticed in any way, shape, or form when you've pretty much just got 0 or 1 or 2 subscribers, it's pretty tough going.
Well, he liked this video, and of course that just puts it in his playlist of liked videos.
Yes,
and it was clearly
appears on his channel page for a few days.
So he didn't need to actually promote my video at all. He just needed to click that little button, and suddenly I saw 300 people come and watch this train wreck of a video I'd made. And from there I gained, I made 10 subscribers or whatever. And
you see, I clawed my way up to about 3,500. And at that point, Sargon then basically said, "Look, would you like a slot on my channel? Because I'll be off for a week or 2."
Yes.
So I made a video, and of course it was viewed about 350,000 times on his channel. So from that, I must have gained about 7,000, 7,500. Now you gain some, but then you lose some of them again, because some of them instantly subscribe, but then when once they've seen a few videos, they think, well, this isn't quite what I imagined or whatever. So it then drops off again a bit.
Oh yes,
but you do get a huge bulk of people that join your channel. So I would say it must be about a third of these almost 20,000 people that are with me since that particular event.
I enjoy Sargon's content because he's relatively he's entertaining, right? And he's very good at talking to the camera and that sort of thing, and doing things in sort of single takes and putting an amusing but emotive spin. But whenever I want a reasonable, like the lilt of something a little softer that's going to talk in enjoyment, I feel like you are the T of his entertainment, of his kind of content. So if I've perhaps oversaturated myself on some of this stuff, I end up
so what you're saying is I am the cup of tea and he's the bourbon biscuit.
Basically, yes. Bear with me 1 second whilst I just deal with the dog.
But you deal with the beast, the clawing at the door or something.
Entertain the chat or something. I'm sure you can be personable with them.
Well, yes, trying to entertain the chat whilst talking to no one in particular. There is one thing that I would bring up when it comes to talking about channels and the amounts, subscriber base and things like that. There are 2 things which are exciting me no end at the moment, and that is this is all related to the algorithm, because none of us have any clue what the algorithm really does. It seems to be this kind of vague, bizarre thing that YouTube have, which decides which channels get promoted, which videos get promoted. But it seems to be doing this on the basis of black magic. So my belief is that there must be some parameters that actually go into this algorithm to drive it. So, what is your average view count during the week? How many videos do you put up? It must consider something. And, obviously now with me being very close to 20,000, I'm intrigued to see whether my hitting 20,000 makes any difference to the way the algorithm treats me.
You wonder if it has soft caps.
Also, I'm very keen to see, because I've been doing a bit of Yorkshire rhubarb forcing, so to speak.
Right.
Because of course there is the rhubarb triangle in Yorkshire that you may or may not have heard about.
No, I'm afraid not.
Well, yeah, that's where pretty much 90% of the world's forced rhubarb is grown. But no, I kind of realized that unlike most of my immediate peers, the channels that are roughly the same, are roughly of the same scale as mine, I have never had a big hit. So if you take someone like Academic Agent, he with the one about the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan.
Oh yes,
he had a video that hit about 200,000 views.
Oh, has it?
And quite a few other channels that are roughly of the similar scale as mine will have at some point hit a kind of very big subject that made them 100,000 views or something like that. I have never had that. And I'm wondering whether that means that in the way the algorithm is viewing my channel, I have something lacking.
Not necessarily, because the algorithm supposedly will penalize you if you do not have consistent viewership.
Yeah. Well,
so
again, that is one of these famous myths that we don't really know. So I have been told this, for example, that yes, that if you don't have constantly pretty much the same hit rate, but at the same time, what I've done now, for example, with my channel, in doing the week that was, and then cutting it into sections and putting those sections up, those sections are obviously getting far fewer views.
Yes, probably.
The first week I did it, I went from, if you count up the totals, I went from having about 10,000 views in total to about 18,000 views. If you counted the sections and the complete version. So I don't know whether it's going to be the inconsistency that affects the algorithm or whether it's going to be the total views that affects the algorithm. We're just going to have to see how it plays it. But I had this, I think the favorite video on my channel is the one on culture, the one where I've got Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and those kind of things in it.
Yes.
That got on its own Steam to about 32,000. And by that time, it had fallen that far down the playing order. I had done that many new videos and whatever. It effectively was no longer accumulating any views. But I felt that is more than likely the one that is most likely to drive stuff to my channel. Yes. So what I did is I pinned it to my
so it's now your
Twitter.
Sort of open... Oh, okay, yes.
So if you go onto the Twitter account, the first post you see is a link to that video. And these days I'm making a lot more noise on Twitter than I did, in earlier times. And it does seem to drive some traffic to the Twitter account and then to that video. So as I said, I got to about 32,000 on the video's own Steam. Since I've allowed it to just sit there for months on Twitter, it has now reached 89,000.
Nice.
So I'm hoping to kind of, this is what I mean with forcing rhubarb. I'm trying to get it to go past 100,000.
A big part of it is where you advertise. I know if I make a video or I'm going to stream on something which is likely to be liberalist related, then I feel comfortable posting a link to that in, the liberalists and that sort of thing. And there's an audience there of about probably 6,000.
Okay,
So I will typically get, a few more views on that sort of thing, and sometimes they'll be plugged by other people as well. So that's quite nice. And if I have guests like yourself or the agent on, then obviously you plug that out through Twitter or whatever, and anyone who's bored and slightly interested comes across and says, "Oh, well, I wish this was on AA's channel or British's channel, but I suppose I'll watch it here." And there you go. But I did. If I talk about something that's both relevant and I have people as well with audience influencers, then it tends to be more successful. But God forbid.
Well, yeah. As I would. I mean, I spoke about it with Academic Agent once long ago, and then nothing came of it. These kind of things. You talk about some kind of project, and then both of you forget about it. And this is now actually the first time I'm remembering it. That we sort of said one day we'll have to do a sort of a stream where we're talking about, what tricks or things we've picked up in making a channel more successful. Because people, particularly kind of, people who are starting out YouTube channels would more than likely be quite interested in knowing that. As in, what do these people do, if you know what I mean?
Indeed, yes.
Because we obviously seem to have climbed the greasy pole to some degree. I mean, even though, compared to the TJ Kirks and the Sargons, we're nowhere. But we've managed to get off the ground, if you know what I mean.
It's quite a funny one. Like, if you watch or if you notice things like Sargon, who came at a very poignant time when no one was making talks about feminism, feminist frequency, or Gamergate, and he was doing that. Which built a large audience because he effectively had a monopoly on the people.
He didn't have himself to compete with. That was there wasn't already a Sargon there who had 500,000 subscribers when he was starting out. So
that's not to say that he doesn't deserve his position.
Well, no, I mean he was flying blind at the time. He pretty much had to basically make the path which now a lot of other people are following in.
And of course, because of the timing and the experience he now has, I think he's got something like 30 billion views or something.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
And not to mention the fact he has 3 separate channels, one of which is currently disabled, but 3 channels. And
I mean, the one thing that I envy most about him is his ability to just by now sit down to camera and talk.
Yes, he's now very comfortable with his type of content, and I love the fact that he's now branching out to doing live shows and that sort of thing. It works very well. But away from kissing the behind of other YouTubers, Dominic asks, "What do the two of you think about For Britain?"
Nothing, because at the moment I don't know what we're talking about.
I assume he's talking about the Facebook group / movement.
I don't do Facebook, so
no,
I don't really.
I believe they're sort of British ethno-nationalists, but the difficulty was they're a little bit they're quite far right, right? But they're not far right in the sense of fascist or in the way that calling them Nazis or whatever, but they had their concerns primarily immigration and that sort of thing. But they were basically shut down by Facebook for being a far-right racist organization.
Well, this is one of the overarching problems that we're facing these days, because we're constantly being told this group or that group have been closed down because they're far-right. And, once upon a time that had meaning. By now it's become completely meaningless, because we know that so many people are being accused. I don't know if it's happened to you yet. I mean, I'm far right, apparently. Anybody can get accused of being far right these days online. And therefore, when you hear that some group has been removed because it was accused of being far right,
it's lost all meaning.
Is this actually a real far right group, or is this just once again one of these slurs?
Dominic says, I'm talking about Anne-Marie Walter's new political party.
I believe she is quite hefty regarding the right, is she not?
I have no idea. I'm afraid I'm just not familiar.
I don't have too much experience with her. I think she was on I think she was on an Undoomed stream once, which this is by pure coincidence, I joined once she had left it. So technically, I have been on a stream with her once, even though we were not there simultaneously.
Amazing. Philip Mason says, "Don't forget us when you're famous." Of course not. Your name is now burned into our minds.
Who's this Philip Mason you're talking about?
Well, he's that guy in between Dominic and Staff Sergeant Sniper.
Drinkers.
Damn coffee drinkers. I have no idea about the Facebook group, but they aren't ethno-nationalists. Again, I am just quoting the hyperbole that has been thrown my way by both a mixture of the media and other people. So it doesn't surprise me whatsoever if I am being inaccurate.
Yes, but I think it's a perfect example of where these constant accusations of far right have led us. That by now it has become so meaningless that you don't even really know if it really does describe some people who are far right, or if it's just one of these slurs again that are completely unfounded. I mean, what was it? I today saw a tweet. I'm trying to remember the name of who it was on Twitter. I think it was kind of a personage, if you know what I mean. And he was talking about the SVP in Switzerland, and they were a far right party. And actually, if you look into them, they are the Conservative Party. They've kind of got a sort of populist angle to them. So they've got various Conservative parties in Switzerland, but this is a Conservative party. They've been around for yonks, if you know what I mean. This is not something that's just sprung up in the last 10 years or so. The Swiss, I believe, are ruled by a council of 7.
Right.
And it is according to your electoral success, effectively, that you will be given a seat on that cabinet. So of the 7 seats, they apparently hold 2. So this is a fairly senior Swiss party.
Yes.
And it's a Conservative party. And the Swiss are not really known for their extremism.
Well, not really. They're pretty much known for their neutrality.
Precisely. So here is a Swiss Conservative Party being accused of being far right. And you just go, hang on a moment. Has anybody really considered this? What are you talking about?
Indeed. Well, it's one of these bizarre things where definitions no longer matter to them in the same to the mainstream, as it were, in the same way. It's like when someone calls someone literally a Nazi, and you go, well, let's face it here, this person is not advocating for the mass, the murder of people, even either their own group or others.
I think there are sort of subtle signs that a group can send. So if you take Switzerland, where you've got the SVP, and as they've been going for yonks, they've been around for ages, and then you take a party, I think it might be the OVP, but I could have the wrong party. Again, O with 2 dots on top, so it's an technically, but who cares? But they have been they've been a party that has been flirting with the far right for quite a few years. So you could go 25, 30 years back, and people were already saying that about them, not because it's social justice slur, but because there was a serious suspicion about them. And if you then see things like several of their politicians, for quite some time before people started cottoning on to it, were wearing a little blue cornflower.
Oh yes, I remember this.
Lapel in their lapel buttonhole. And that was actually a sign of the Nazi sympathizers in Austria prior to Austria being taken over by Germany, before the so-called Anschluss, when Austria was joined with Germany.
Grief.
So the Nazis that were operating within Austria at that time
were denoting each other.
in order to signal to each other, I'm one of us, were wearing a blue cornflower in their lapel buttonhole. So when you've then got people like that, mainstream politicians with that flower in their buttonhole, declaring innocence, saying, I don't know what you mean,
Yes.
We all know what you're up to. Now, that is where you can say that they clearly seem to be
they know what they're doing.
Yeah, they're flirting with the far right, clearly. Yeah. Whereas if you then look at the Swiss example, so an immediate neighboring country, and you look at a party that is against immigration, but is showing no other outward signs of any flirting with far right attitudes, that's when you go, hang on, here these people are just basically saying, they're just taking it as read. It's just being spelled out as fact. This is a far right party. And it's more than likely just the case because they're anti-immigration and whatever. And you think, well, I'm sorry, but if you know the Swiss background, you would know why there is an anti-immigration sentiment.
I also find the phrase anti-immigration to be, demonstrably untrue, because most people who are, quote, anti-immigration are not anti-immigration. They are anti-mass migration. They are anti-economic migrant.
I mean, in the case of Switzerland, you're more than likely looking at veritable anti-immigration.
Okay.
Because if you look at Switzerland, it's got a population larger than that of Scotland. I think they've got about 8 million by now, something like that. Now, look at them on the map. They're a small country.
Yes.
Now consider most of that territory isn't even inhabitable because it's mountains.
Yes.
And that's when you suddenly realize they're an extremely densely populated nation.
It's very tight, isn't it?
And once they then opened the borders because of their trade deals, so even though they're not a part of the EU, they have got trade deals with the EU which also allow for freedom of movement.
Yes.
So I think over the last 20 years or so, it could even be a shorter period, I think they've gone up by 1 million inhabitants. That is on a total of previously 7 million or so.
That's insane.
So that's like, as if you just add 1 million to Scotland.
Yes, it's almost as bad as the original proposal for the Irish in this latest set of talks with the EU, where they basically said to Ireland, which has a population of about 4 million, I believe, you all need to take 1 million migrants. Basically over a period of 40 years, but you'll need to take 1 million of them, and they basically were being told that their economy would be crashed if they didn't. They managed to negotiate their way out of most of it.
Yeah,
but even so, that is insane.
The reason I know this about the Swiss is because the Swiss were the first to rebel. That's what we always have to remember. Brexit came about 2 or 2.5 years after the Swiss held a referendum. If you get 100,000 signatures in Switzerland, you can demand a referendum.
Yes.
And they are very much a country that kind of believes in direct democracy and whatever. So they're constantly
they're small enough to allow it.
Yeah, they're constantly having these referenda. And what basically happened is that a referendum was put up saying no more immigration, which of course was in direct contravention of the agreements with the EU. And the people voted for it. They basically said, look, we don't care what the agreement is with the EU.
We don't want it. Yes.
And the government at the time was strongly advising everybody, don't do it. And they went ahead and did it anyway.
That's how strong the feeling was.
Yes. And thereafter, the Swiss government was in a bit of a conundrum because, everybody knew that they hadn't wanted it, but the people had said, we want it.
Yes.
So I think, I don't know, I don't know the exact inner workings of the Swiss constitution.
But it wouldn't surprise me if you did.
But apparently they have a certain amount of leeway, as in how much time can elapse before they need to impose something that has been voted for by the people.
Yes.
So during that time, they were kind of trying to do the softly game with the EU, as in, look, can we negotiate something here? And the EU were, doing their usual bastard thing, as in sort of, we're playing hardball.
Yeah.
And they kind of stretched it, and then came the Brexit vote.
Yeah.
And since then, the Swiss have always been told, well, you'll just have to wait your turn. We have to deal with the British first. They're the bigger problem.
Funny
what is interesting in that is that there was a headline. I believe I retweeted it once or whatever. I might have even mentioned it in one of the weeks it was. I'm not sure. Perhaps 2 or 3 months back, I saw a headline whereby some Swiss politicians had said that, how David Davis has been traveling all around Europe trying to work trade deals and whatever, trying to convince European politicians of giving Britain a decent trade deal and so on. He's not only been going to the various countries per se, he's also been going to certain regions where he knows that certain regions are dependent on exports to Britain and things like that, to try and get those regions to put pressure on their governments. Well, of course, one of the countries he must have visited was Switzerland. Because Switzerland, would you believe it, is something like the 20th largest economy in the world, despite its tiny size.
It's probably because despite their tiny size, their population is incredibly wealthy and taxed to hell and back.
Yes.
Which is why the price of a pint in Stockholm is between 9 and 12.
No, Stockholm, that's Sweden.
Not Stockholm. But in
so that would be Bern, the capital in Sweden, in Switzerland, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know where I pulled Stockholm from, but the price of a pint is something like £9 or £12 in the capital.
It will be ludicrous. Yes, I mean if you overprice everything because the demand for everything goes up because you're cramming that many people into that tighter space, you will get that phenomenon, won't you? I don't know where I was anymore there, but more than likely milked. You were telling me that you wouldn't be surprised whether I could tell you something about Switzerland. So I will tell you something obscure about Switzerland.
Make it entertaining, and we'll end on it.
They have got 5 national languages.
Right, for a tiny country like that.
Yes, so everything that is published needs to be, any government document needs to be published in 5 languages.
Strong.
Actually, really, it only needs to be published in 4. But they publish a lot also in the 5th. And there is a very curious little reason for that. So the 4 languages they speak are French, Italian, German, and Romansh.
What on earth is Romansh?
Yes, Romansh is something that is actually a remnant of Roman. So basically it's Latin. It goes back to that. So it's the people of Grisons, or Graubünden, as the German speakers call it, that live somewhere in the Alps, and they've still got their own language, so to speak, which is something completely unspeakable. I mean, you hear it and you just go, good God. It sort of sounds like something like, Gaelic, Welsh, Glaswegian, and Liverpudlian crammed together, if you know what I mean. But because the Swiss have such a delicate federal system, whereby particularly, of course, the German speakers and the French speakers, who make the 2 major parts, are constantly, jealously looking over each other, over each shoulder at each other.
Yes.
To make sure that the other one isn't getting any favoritism. You've got this problem. How do you do anything without being accused of favoring one of the others?
Yes, given...
And therefore, the 5th official Swiss language is Latin. So if you look at a Swiss stamp, it doesn't say Swiss, it doesn't say Schweiz, it doesn't say Svizzera. So it doesn't use any of the languages of the country.
Yeah.
It's Helvetia, which goes back to the tribe that Caesar defeated, the Helvetians, that came from around about there. So it's basically the Latin, the closest approximation of a Latin term for Switzerland.
If I ever am questioned about the closest approximation for a Latin term for Switzerland, I will now know. And Helvetian.
Here is something to look out for. You know how if you travel around on the motorways and whatever in Europe, you need to have your sticker to indicate which country you're from.
Yes.
So I is for Italy, F for France,
etc., etc.
D for Germany, GB for Great Britain, and so on. The Swiss have CH. And of course, again, this, every word for Switzerland would really begin with an S, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So again, it doesn't seem to have any relevance to their local languages, because again, it's Latin. Confederatio Helvetica, the Swiss Confederation, or the Helvetian Confederation.
Amazing.
With all those things that are kind of officialdom, they tend to lean toward Latin, so that none of the various parts of Switzerland can accuse the other part of being the favorite of the government, so to speak.
Okay, well, I have an interesting piece of trivia you may or may not know yourself, which stems from.
I am open and ready to learn. Go ahead, dazzle me.
It is about a particular building in Jerusalem that has a ladder that leans against it.
Okay, yeah, I think I know which building you mean, and I think I know which ladder.
And this ladder cannot be moved.
Yes.
And it has stood there for 300 years.
So we are told.
So we are told. It has supposedly been, it's been replaced over time. But, the idea of this ladder being in place anyway is that because the church was owned by 5 different sects.
Well, it's the Holy Sepulchre Church, isn't it? That's the Holy Sepulchre. Yes.
And it was a host to 5 different, including some bizarre ones, like there's a Nigerian church sect that is a part of it, and that sort of thing. And when basically one of the emperors, one of the leaders of who was resident in Jerusalem at one point, because there was so much infighting between so many different groups who were laying claim to the Holy Land, basically decreed that what was, and that basically that anyone who had laid claim to the land that they were currently holding, that was their land. And of course, because this sepulchre church was owned by these 5 different groups, it was owned by all of them. And it was decreed that nothing could be changed on the sites of any of these holy
without
positions,
the agreement
of all 5 groups, or in any other case, of the people who owned it. And so, unless the 5 groups can come to an agreement that anything at all, could be changed, it doesn't. So there is a potentially a myth, but potentially not. In fact, no, I'll take a more recent example where one of these sects moved a chair to get a better sitting position.
I think it was one of the Greek Orthodox chaps, wasn't it?
And it caused such a stir that basically all of the sects started having a fight, and the IDF had to come in, and
I think they have fights once in a while there. I don't think they're too peaceable.
No, but the IDF had to come in and break them up, basically.
So I'm just trying to think who they are. I think they're Ethiopians are there.
Oh, it might be, yes.
The Ethiopians, I think it's the Egyptian Coptics. Then surely it must be the Armenians.
Oh, for goodness sake, man. How do you know more about the story which I am telling you?
The Greek Orthodox. And then who would be the 5th? Oh, yes, I know. I think that's the Catholics. Yes, it's the Catholics. So those are the 5. Sorry, please move on.
I'm just amazed that you know more about the story that I'm trying to elucidate to you than I do myself off the top of my head. And that this is something that has popped up that cannot have held your attention for more than perhaps an hour, and yet you've somehow intrinsically managed to internalize.
I usurped this, have I?
You have. Well, I don't know about usurped, but I just am immensely entertained by the fact that you've just retained the knowledge like anything else. But anyway, it is 11:30 now, and to those who have,
is there still something more to come from this story, or was that it?
Oh no, it was just an interesting factoid.
Because I would just like to say there is one little factoid to add to that particular story.
Is it about the guy who stole it? Who stole the ladder?
No, it's not about the guy who stole the ladder. It's that it isn't believed that there can be any agreement to remove the ladder. because I believe it was the Pope. Hence, I think it's the one of the groups is the Catholics, who basically said that everything will, this kind of conundrum that they've got with everybody having to agree will have to remain in place until such a date as the Greek Orthodox and the Catholic Church become one again.
Recombine.
So effectively, the Catholics have basically claimed their stake, as in saying, look, until the Greeks, basically the great schism between the Catholics and the Greek Orthodox Church
is healed.
Until that is healed, this ordeal in the Holy Sepulchre will continue.
Amazing.
And of course, the reason why I said that the Armenians, of course, would be there was because the Armenians were the first kingdom to officially become Christian.
And there you go.
So they even beat the Roman Empire to it.
Strong. Well, on that note, thank you very much for joining me, Mr. Bridger.
It was an honor and a privilege. I didn't know one could get quite this much traction out of tea. I am amazed.
I know, but it was immensely entertaining. It's always a joy to have you on. And to anyone in the chat who is still here from the very beginning, well done. Goodness me. But to the 10 of you who are left, thank you very much for watching and engaging in the chat and so on and so forth. And we will hopefully we'll do another stream another time.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to.
And yes, until then. But take care, everybody, and good night.
See you about.